Chapter 577. The walls of the dark and damp cave were inlaid with some sort of green gemstone that emitted a weak light, making this place even more gloomy. On the uneven ground, skeletons were scattered about. Most of them were deathly pale. It seemed that they had died for a long time. But now, there were several new skeletons that were still emitting the stench of blood. His line of sight continued forwards. In the deepest depths of the cave, there was a seemingly small pool of water. At this time, there was the sound of waves, and a shadow crawled out. It had hands and feet, and its appearance was similar to a human's, but it was extremely ugly. Its face was green, and its fangs were like those of a malicious spirit. Its slender eyes swept around its surroundings. It didn't sense anything wrong. It lay on the ground and used its hands and feet, nimbly arriving in front of the stone pillar in the blink of an eye. Right now, there was a woman bound to this stone pillar. She was exceptionally beautiful, but she was unconscious, and her pale face made one feel even more pity for her. A scarlet tongue swept across its lips, and its slender eyes flashed with lust. It lifted a hand, and sharp claws emerged from its fingertips, tearing apart the woman's clothes. She was immediately assaulted by the light of spring. At this time, the unconscious woman suddenly opened her eyes. They were ice cold. She lifted her hand like lightning. At some unknown time, she had already broken free from her shackles and shot straight for the ugly humanoid creature's throat. The timing she chose to launch an attack was also perfect. Unfortunately, this strike didn't obtain the slightest bit of effect. A long tongue wrapped around her wrist. It was exceptionally long, wrapping around her arm until it arrived in front of the woman. The humanoid creature's eyes flashed with a playful light. In the next moment, its tongue violently plunged into the woman's mouth. Then there was the sound of swallowing that made one's scalp tingle. The woman's eyes widened and twisted, but she couldn't break free at all. Her body rapidly withered, and in the blink of an eye, she was nothing but a bag of bones. Its eye sockets were deeply sunken, revealing withered eyeballs. Then it turned around twice before completely dimming down. The tongue retracted from the corpse's mouth, but it wasn't willing to let go of the slightest bit of flesh and blood. Only after the last bit of dried skin was it reluctantly retracted. On the ground, there was a new corpse. The ugly creature smacked its lips as if it was savoring the delicious taste of blood and flesh. Its bulging abdomen wriggled as it quickly digested and absorbed the blood. Suddenly, its eyes widened and a cold light shot out from its slender eyes. Then it began to speak in human language. Interesting. Someone actually came specifically for me. The master of the nine-heaven mirror moon palace of the immortal sect. TSK, the exalted forgotten emotions and the great Tao. Her flesh and blood must be delicious. The one that had been cleanly swallowed just now was one of the female cultivators at Shun Yuanin's side. As for this incomparably ugly humanoid creature, it was the infamous water demon. It could only be said that Shun Yuanin's luck was quite bad. Before she even arrived, she had already been discovered by this monster. The water demon's eyes flashed. Although it had been slumbering in the sea of purgatory for many years, the name of the immortal sect still reverberated in its ears. Even with its strength, it didn't have absolute confidence it could swallow Shun Yuanin, even if she had just become the master of Nine-Heaven Mirror Moon Palace. The immortal sect's three giants each had their own terrifying inheritances. In a critical moment, each of them could erupt with a terrifying strength. Since I can't do it openly, I'll have to use some other methods. The water demon chuckled. A layer of black water suddenly wrapped around it. After it scattered, there was no longer any trace of its previous ugly appearance. It was actually another Shun Yuanin. Her movements, and even her aura, could be mistaken for the real one. The water demon was born with supernatural powers and was able to transform into a myriad of forms. To it, this was easy. A good show is about to begin, Your Majesty Palace Master. The 27 crystals were scattered around, weaving together into an array formation. They temporarily sealed off the space so that it wasn't known to the outside world. Unless one stepped into the array formation, they wouldn't be able to sense anything even if they approached. Shen Yuanin sat down cross-legged. Her face was cold and beautiful, and her aura was like that of a goddess. No one dared to blaspheme her. Not too far away, Sang Zhu's eyes occasionally fell on her, revealing a deeply concealed burning heat. She didn't know the identity of this female immortal sect cultivator, but there was one thing she was sure of. Within this woman's body, there was a pure aura. It was bone-chilling, yet noble, like a halo of divinity. If she could take this aura for herself, she could definitely help her Yin body evolve. Once she obtained an extreme Yin body, even if she lost the hellish evil spirit, she could still obtain the qualifications to fight against her destiny. It was because of this that Sang Zhu had schemed to stay by Shen Yuanin's side. She had been waiting for an opportunity, but Shen Yuanin's aura was far too terrifying. Moreover, her spiritual sense was terrifyingly strong. In these past days, Sang Zhu hadn't been able to find an opportunity. She looked at Shen Yuanin again and forcefully suppressed the greed in her heart. She closed her eyes and told herself that she had to be patient, because there was only one chance. On a rocky hillside, a figure flew over at a low altitude. He landed on a stone and carefully sensed the extremely rich, ice-cold aura in the air. He smiled. That's right, it was this strength. He wasn't too far from the water demon's lair. This figure was Qinyu. On the day that he had saved Feng Yunyun, this woman had woken up half a day later. Although she thanked Qinyu over and over again, her eyes were still guarded against him. After being saved by a stranger for no reason, it was normal for her to have such a reaction. Qinyu was well aware that the reason was because he was hiding his identity, so he didn't care. After asking, Feng Yunyun said that she had a treasure on her that could isolate her aura and form a small space that she could use to recuperate. Qinyu watched as she activated the treasure and carefully sensed that as long as his luck wasn't too bad, there shouldn't be any problems. Then he bid his farewells. Time was tight to begin with, and it was impossible for him to bring Feng Yunyun along with him. This result couldn't be any better. Because of this, Feng Yunyun, who had always been on guard against him, felt a bit embarrassed. But Qinyu left just like that. Looking at his fading back, Feng Yunyun didn't even have time to apologize. She could only sigh inwardly, thinking that there were still good people in this world. After Qinyu and Feng Yunyun separated, it was now the 14th day since they entered the Sea of Purgatory. Nearly half of the 1-month deadline had passed. Luckily, he was about to arrive. However, the water demon was tyrannical. According to the records of the demonic path, it had the strength of a calamity immortal realm supreme elder. It was at least comparable to a third-level calamity immortal. Originally, with Wei Jia and the others helping him, he had some chances of success. But now that he was alone, his chances of success were less than 10%. If he acted hastily, let alone hunting down the water demon, he feared he might even lose his life in vain. Along the way, Qinyu was constantly thinking, but how could the disparity in absolute strength be so easily made up for? In addition, the purple-back blue-wing ants hadn't completed their second transformation yet. Otherwise, he would have one more card in his hand. He shook his head and suppressed these chaotic thoughts. When the boat reached the bridge, it would naturally straighten itself out. Thinking too much about it was useless. He would take things one step at a time. Perhaps an opportunity was right in front of him. Stepping forwards, Qinyu continued forwards. But before he could find a way to hunt down the water demon, he first encountered a group of vengeful cultivators. Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment. Several people stopped in the distance. One of them flew over and swept his eyes over Qinyu. Seeing that he was hiding his aura, he didn't dare to be rude. To be able to rush deep into the sea of purgatory by himself, one didn't need to be a genius to know that this wasn't an ordinary person. Qinyu asked, "What is it?" Although these people didn't show any signs of danger, he still didn't dare to underestimate them. The cultivator cupped his hands together. "May I ask, fellow Taoist, have you encountered this woman here?" As he spoke, he took out a jade slip. as he poured magic power into it. The jade slip emitted a bright light that projected the figure of a woman. Qin Yu's heart shook, and he almost revealed a strange expression. Luckily, his mind was strong enough. He maintained his composure and said, "I haven't seen her." The cultivator revealed a disappointed expression, but didn't say anything. He cupped his hands together and left. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. Although the projection wasn't too clear, that cold aura and indifferent eyes left a deep impression on him. Just what trouble had that woman provoked? But thinking about it, with her icy cold appearance, even if she was beautiful, it would only take a moment for her to form a grudge. But after that, Qin Yu encountered two more groups of cultivators, both of them looking for Shen Yuanin. This time, he was truly curious. He looked for a reason to ask a few questions. Although the other party's words were vague, he still understood the approximate reason. His complexion became strange. It turned out that these people were seeking revenge because their loved ones and friends had perished under Shen Yuanin's hands. And the reason they died was because they had been plucked to death. The so-called plucking was one of the yin and yang dual cultivation methods. In the cultivation world, it wasn't considered a shameful cultivation method. When one's Tao companion cultivated together, they would usually practice it once or twice. Plucking was one of the pleasures of the boudoir, but it could also promote the cultivation of both parties. There were many benefits to it. But in dual cultivation, there were also some extremely ruthless methods. Through the intercourse of yin and yang, one could plunder another's cultivation and life force in order to increase their strength. Killing someone was one of the cruelest methods. Although he had only seen her twice and the results weren't pleasant, after learning the truth, Qin Yu's first thought was that it was impossible. That woman's cold and indifferent demeanor wasn't an act at all. If it was said that she killed people in a fit of rage, he could accept it, but to say that she had done something improper to harm others, Qin Yu didn't believe it from the bottom of his heart. But these three groups of cultivators had all held jade slips that clearly contained Shen Yuanin. Even if they wanted to pluck her, there was no need for them to do it here. Moreover, they wouldn't do it in such an unscrupulous manner, right? This couldn't be explained at all. Qin Yu's lips twitched. He felt that there was something wrong with his brain. Why was he meddling in other people's business? Whether that woman was good or bad, whether she was seeking death or being wrongly accused, he would let her do as she pleased. In any case, they had only met by chance, and there wasn't the slightest bit of friendship between them. However, for so many people to come to seek revenge was actually good news for Qin Yu. With just himself, it was nearly impossible for him to hunt down the water demon. Borrowing the strength of others was the best choice. And this place just happened to be not too far from the water demon's lair. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. His thoughts raced as he tried to think of a method to draw everyone out. Although it would be nice to be the fisherman that reaps the benefits, it wasn't a simple matter. Shen Yuanin stopped. She took out a jade plate and probed it with her divine sense. After several breaths of time, she put it away. That's right, the water demon's lair was nearby. She turned and lightly said, "Sang Zhu, you can leave." What followed was a bitter battle. Even she didn't have absolute confidence she could win. Sang Zhu was anxious, but she didn't reveal any of it on her face. She only said, "I still haven't repaid you at all. I asked that fairy maiden allow me to stay a little longer." Shen Yuanin was expressionless. I don't want to say the same words a second time. Sang Zhu clenched her teeth so hard that they nearly broke. But after spending some time together, she understood Shen Yuanin's temperament. Since she said something like this, there was no turning back. If she said anything more, it would be even worse. She squeezed out a smile and bowed. If that's the case, then fairy maiden, take care. Shen Yuanin turned to leave. But at this time, two cultivators flew towards her. One was a man and one was a woman, their auras tyrannical. "You slut, it's you." The man was startled for a moment before he roared out in anger. His eyes were cruel to the extreme. "Give me back my son's life." As he spoke, he attacked. Brilliant sword light instantly pierced through the vast skies, a wild, killing intent shaking the heavens and earth. Shen Yuanin frowned. She lifted a hand and thrust forwards, instantly freezing the sword light. "Who are you?" The female cultivator across from her screamed. "I am the one who will take your life." She lifted a hand and slapped between her eyebrows. The space between her eyebrows split open and a blood-red light flashed, turning into a sword. Shen Yuanin's eyes were icy cold. After reaching large success of the sublime lost emotion code, she killed as she pleased. She no longer had any compassion for the myriad beings in the world. This man and woman's heavy attacks had aroused her killing intent. She no longer held back. Pa! The frozen sword light shattered into countless pieces. The man stuffily coughed, and blood flowed out from the corners of his lips. His eyes were filled with shock. "Little sister, be careful." But this warning was too late. Shen Yuanin pointed a finger, and the blood-red light condensed into a sword that trembled and collapsed. The light in the woman's eyes instantly faded away. Her life sword had been destroyed, and her soul had been extinguished. The man held onto her corpse and roared out like a wild beast. "Slut, my family was kind enough to save you, but in the end you've fallen to such a state. You will die a horrible death." Bang! A terrifying sword intent shot into the skies. It was like a lighthouse in the dark night, known in all directions. In the next moment, this monstrous sword cut down. The man's face was drained of blood, and he had died. Shen Yuanin's face didn't change at all. She flicked her sleeves, and space twisted. As the heaven-shaking sword fell in, it was crushed to pieces. Although this seemed casual, she couldn't help but furrow her eyebrows, a weary look on her face. Sang Zhu's eyes brightened. She had long suspected that there was a problem with this incomparably powerful female cultivator's body. Otherwise, why would she need to be on guard during their cultivation journey? The scene in front of her undoubtedly confirmed this. Perhaps the opportunity she had been searching for was now right in front of her. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound of breaking air filled the air. From afar, one could see beams of light hurtling towards them at an astonishing speed. In the distance, space began to collapse. There were even several people who didn't hesitate to break through the void to arrive. Without exception, when these cultivators saw Shen Yuanin, they all gnashed their teeth, killing intent boiling in their eyes. "It's her! You killed my beloved disciple. Today you will die. Kill her and burn her bones to ashes. You evil woman, let's see where you run off to." With a roar, a thick aura locked onto Shen Yuanin. She frowned. She flicked her sleeves, and a massive divine palace phantom appeared above her head. An icy cold and dignified voice, stimulated by her powerful cultivation, spread out in all directions. "I'm a direct disciple of the immortal sect. Who are you that you dare to surround me?" Killing intent billowed around everyone. As they heard this, their complexions changed. Immortal sect, to be able to summon the projection of an immortal palace, there was no doubt that she was a direct disciple. Moreover, she was one of the highest existences, one with an incomparably honored status. The demonic path was famous for protecting their own, and the immortal sect's ability to hold grudges was also well known. If they killed this woman, there would surely be trouble for them. Seeing that she had awed them, Shen Yuanin continued to say, "I do not know any of you. There must be some misunderstanding here." A female cultivator screamed, "Misunderstanding? Even if you turned to ashes, I would still recognize you." Her eyes swept around. "So what if you were a direct disciple of the immortal sect?" "A life for a life is the highest principle of the heavenly Tao. You might be afraid of me, but I'm not. At worst, I'll just die." Shen Yuanin frowned. "Who are you? At this point, you still dare to quibble. Do you think all of us have admitted our wrongs?" The female cultivator's voice was shrill and shrill. "Open your eyes wide and look carefully. Is this woman in front of you your enemy? There's no mistake, it's her. Appearances can be changed, but aura cannot be wrong. Even if you're someone from the immortal sect, you cannot be forgiven for doing such a cruel and unforgivable thing. It's her, it's her." Shen Yuanin coldly said, "During this period of time, I've been together with this woman. I haven't taken a single step away from her." Shua. Countless eyes gathered on Sang-ju. The crowd cried out, "Your Highness Sang-ju!" They actually recognized her. In the Qi Empire's diplomatic mission, there was a prince and a princess. They had both entered the Sea of Purgatory, and as soon as everyone heard their names, they were able to recognize them. If they could obtain the testimony of a princess, then even if it couldn't completely wash away the suspicions of Shun Yuanin, it would at least calm everyone down. But at this time, Sang-ju's mind was spinning with another thought. With Shun Yuanin's temperament, she was as cold as an ice statue. Unless she had no other choice, she would never explain herself. Now that she had said so much, the only explanation she could think of was that with her current condition, she wouldn't be able to withstand a great battle. Her thoughts raced. After several breaths of time, Sang-ju made her decision. Now was the best chance. She absolutely could not miss it. With her mind set, Sang-ju didn't hesitate any longer. She looked up, a look of panic on her face. "Everyone, save me." Sang-ju was forced by her. That woman was injured not too long ago. If I wait for her to recover, both you and I will die here. Her words were vague and unclear, but at this time, it was enough. Shun Yuanin paused for a moment. Her eyes were ice-cold as she looked at Sang-ju. In the eyes of others, this was the anger of someone who had been exposed. "What else do you have to say, you slut? Kill her. The law doesn't punish too many people. So what if it's the immortal sect? As long as no one speaks of her, how can the immortal sect know that she died under our hands?" Sang-ju's words became the final straw that broke everyone's hearts. Of course, the other reason was that what someone said before was correct. Everyone present had been contaminated by this karma. Only an idiot would speak of it. The Sea of Purgatory had suffered countless casualties this time. The death of an immortal sect direct disciple wasn't remarkable at all. Killing her wouldn't be too troublesome. Shun Yuanin could clearly feel the killing intent in everyone's hearts. She lifted a hand and pointed behind her. Sang-ju's heart chilled. She hid behind someone, and in the next moment, the cultivator in front of her was covered in ice. "Kacha! Kacha!" Cracks appeared, and the cultivator broke into countless pieces. His corpse fell to the ground. This scene left Sang-ju deathly pale. If she hadn't been prepared, the one to die would have been her. "Attack! Kill!" Shun Yuanin killed everyone, setting off the prelude to a great battle. Cultivators all attacked with hate in their hearts. To be able to rush into the Sea of Purgatory's forbidden land, whether it was alone or together, their strength couldn't be underestimated. Now that they attacked together, the light of supernatural powers flooded the world. The dazzling light was an extremely terrifying destructive strength. But at this moment, Shun Yuanin erupted with a strength that surpassed all imaginations. She lifted her hands, and the phantom of the immortal palace above her spread out, protecting her within. All of the supernatural powers fell into the immortal palace phantom. Their strength rapidly weakened until they vanished from sight. This scene caused everyone's pupils to shrink. To be able to block all of their attacks. How could the word terrifying describe her strength? Did an immortal sect female cultivator with such a cultivation need to pluck her? Thinking deeper, what sort of status did a female cultivator with such a cultivation have in the immortal sect? Their hearts trembled. They feared that there really was a misunderstanding here. But with things having come to this step, could they still explain it? Even if they did, would this cold-faced immortal sect female cultivator let them go? Would the immortal sect show mercy? Clenching their teeth, a cold light flashed in their eyes. Now, they had no other choice. Even if they knew they were wrong, they could only continue their mistake to the end and kill her. As long as she died, everything would be over. Everyone would have a guilty conscience in their hearts, and no one would say anything. Bang, bang. For a time, the light of supernatural powers didn't diminish at all. Rather, it became even more terrifying than before. Shun Yuanin had a faint expression. She could naturally feel the changes in everyone's mood. The depths of her eyes became increasingly cold. She lifted a hand and pointed at the void. Several fingers fell down, and strong winds rose up, causing the surrounding temperature to rapidly fall. White snowflakes fluttered down from above. They fell fast and dense, covering the earth in an instant. Each of these snowflakes contained an extremely terrifying coldness. As soon as they came into contact with flesh and blood, they would immediately merge with it. Soon, the surrounding cultivators all revealed horrified expressions. The magic power in their bodies stagnated and the flow of blood slowed down. It was as if their entire bodies were frozen solid. To block the attacks with one hand and then attack everyone with the other, and with such a strong and fierce attack, this awakened the fear they felt towards the immortal sect. The momentum of the attacks slowed down. Many people retreated, trying their best to avoid being covered by the snowflakes. At this time, a figure broke through the snow and appeared outside the immortal palace phantom. This was a handsome youth. He had a graceful bearing, and a cold light surged in his starry eyes. He lifted a hand and punched out. Bang! A wild strength was gathered into this fist. The immortal palace phantom caved in and began to twist. The majestic palaces were twisted apart, causing chaos and chaos to descend. The youth was forced back by the formidable strength. Every step he took shattered space. His complexion paled, and he finally spat out a mouthful of blood. But as he spat out blood, Shen Yuanin frowned. She revealed a pained expression, and her eyes darkened. The immortal palace phantom collapsed. The youth stopped. His eyes were as cold as lightning. Everyone, if you don't attack now, when will you? Everyone that had just retreated had a vicious light in their eyes once more. While she was sick, they would take her life. Shen Yuanin took a deep breath. Faint traces of white light broke out from her body, making her seem incomparably pure and holy, as if she were about to ascend to immortality. In the next moment, this white light wrapped around her. She was like a meteor that cut through the horizon. All that blocked her was crushed to pieces. Her speed was inconceivably fast as she vanished from sight. She escaped. Everyone stopped, their complexions distressed. The youth formed hand seals and shot out several blood balls. I've already placed a mark on her body. With these blood balls, I can sense her position. We must eliminate all evil. We cannot allow this woman to escape and continue harming the world. These words were filled with righteousness. Everyone was overjoyed. They expressed their thanks and took the blood beads, howling away based on their senses. They could not allow this immortal sect female cultivator to live, otherwise they would all die. They were clearly seeking revenge and standing on the side of righteousness, but things had actually progressed to such a degree. It wasn't that no one regretted their actions, but that it was already too late. They had to kill her. Sangju forcefully suppressed her shock. Brother 17, the youth turned around. His eyes flashed, and he smiled. So Royal Sister was also here. Now isn't the time to speak. You, and I should also follow. We must kill this woman. As he spoke, a cold chill filled the air. Sangju respectfully nodded. I will follow Brother 17's orders. The two of them held away. Sangju fell behind. As she looked at the youth's back, her eyes were cloudy and uncertain. She never knew that the usually low-key and patient old 17 would actually possess such formidable strength. It really wasn't a lie that the Emperor races were filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Qin Yu frowned, his complexion a bit ill. According to the demon envoy's instructions, he should have been able to lock onto the water gloom's aura. But now, after using the secret art, his senses were blurred and blurred. Could it be that the changes in the sea of purgatory had affected the effect of the secret art? If so, then things would become troublesome. Although he had drawn out the approximate range of the water gloom's location, this range covered at least 1,000 miles. If he wanted to slowly search through this area, it would take a great deal of time. He simply couldn't afford a delay. Thinking of this, Qin Yu's eyes became increasingly gloomy. At this time, there was the sound of breaking air in his ears. His heart chilled, and he looked up to see a mass of white light howling towards him. Its speed was astonishing, and the aura it emitted was swift and fierce. However, as he saw this white light fly over his head and not stop or reveal any ill intent. Chinyu relaxed a little. He didn't want to meddle in the current situation, so he turned to leave. But suddenly, the white light that flew over his head collapsed and dissipated, revealing the unconscious figure of a woman that fell from the air. It was her. Her face was deathly pale, and her aura was weak to the extreme. At this moment, Chinyu didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a sour feeling in his heart. By the time he reacted, he had already flown over. He revealed a hesitant look in his eyes, but in the end he caught Shun Yuanin by the waist and landed on the ground. She was unconscious, and her appearance was still cold and distant, but she lacked the aura that pushed people away from her for 1,000 miles. She weakly leaned against Chinyu's chest, looking frail and weak. Chinyu bitterly smiled. The two of them couldn't be considered enemies, but they definitely weren't friends either. Thinking back to the unpleasant encounter they had before, it was already benevolent of him not to hit her while she was down. But if he saved her, would that cause trouble for himself? Reason told Chinyu that he shouldn't meddle in this matter. But after a long period of silence, he didn't let go. Damn, he really was crazy. In the past, he never discovered that he had the potential to be obsessed with women. Or was it because he never had a chance to put into practice? Perhaps teasing himself was a way to comfort himself. He didn't know if it would work on others, but at the very least, Chinyu felt a little better. He looked down at Shun Yuanin and shook his head. Then, his figure flashed, and he rapidly flew away. Although he didn't know who was chasing her, he didn't need to be an idiot to know that someone that could force such a powerful woman to such a degree was absolutely terrifying. Of course, it was best to leave as soon as possible. Saving her was already stupid enough. If he were to throw himself into danger because of this, then he really would become a joke. Shwa, shwa. Chapter 578. The altar was made of stone. It was wide at the bottom and narrow at the top. After countless years of erosion, it had been damaged in many places, making it seem bleak and desolate. But as one looked down, one could still feel the majesty and dignity of the altar that hadn't yet faded away. Several figures stood beneath the altar, looking at its dilapidated state. Their eyes were bitter, but also a bit excited. One of them was an old man with white hair. His face was covered in layers of wrinkles, each one filled with the aura of time. With a loud thud, he fell to his knees. His body trembled as he kissed the earth. Turbid tears rolled down his cheeks. The descendants are unfilial, bringing shame to our ancestors. The people around him also knelt down. They clenched their fists, heavy expressions on their faces. Zhang Lingtian was the first to stand up. He slowly said, "Great-grand-uncle, since we were able to find this place, it is because our ancestors are protected by the heavens. There is no need for you to worry too much." The old man wiped away his tears. "Your Highness is right. It was all my fault. I couldn't suppress my emotions for a moment." He looked at the altar. "The Emperor's seal is here. As long as you can obtain it, your Highness will obtain it. An invisible destiny will be added to your body." Zhang Lingtian bowed, solemnly saluting. "I'll have to trouble great-grand-uncle." The old man revealed a solemn expression. "This is my duty. My branch of the clan was born for this purpose. Your Highness, please wait a moment. We will immediately ask for the Emperor's seal." He waved his hand. Several people behind him stood up. With a bit of silence, they scattered around the altar. "Begin," the old man said. Outside the altar, several people cut their palms at the same time. Dark red blood gushed out. But as the blood dripped down, it was attracted by an invisible strength and floated in midair. A humming sound came from deep within the ruined altar. It carried with it the weakness and exhaustion of countless years of slumber, as well as an unconcealable restlessness. The complexions of those who bled changed. Their faces paled. Then, the floating blood stretched out and connected to the altar. As it absorbed the blood, the ground trembled. Dark golden runes appeared on the surface of the altar. At first, they were messy and incomplete. But as they increased in number, they gradually linked together, forming an incomparably complex arrayed diagram. However, due to the destruction of the altar, some parts of the diagram had been damaged, causing the power of the formation to be unable to circulate. The old man's eyes swept over the damaged parts of the array diagram. He paused for several breaths of time and sighed inwardly. Then he made up his mind. "Your Highness, all of our clan's hopes rest on you. I hope that your Highness will be careful in the future and live up to the clan's expectations." Jean Lington bowed, his expression firm like stone. "I will remember Grand Uncle's teachings." Lin Weiwei knelt on the ground and paid her respects in place of her elder brother. She knew very well what kind of price her granduncle and the others would have to pay. "Your name will definitely be recorded in the family tree and remembered by future generations. We will be eternally grateful." The old man smiled, and the wrinkles on his face smoothed out. He seemed much younger. He had been waiting for this day his entire life. Thinking back to the hesitation and unwillingness in his heart, he could not help but mock himself. Sure enough, after living for a long time, one would instinctively cherish life. Fortunately, although he cherished his life, he did not forget the responsibility he carried. He stepped forwards and floated above the altar. He spread out his arms, and blood-red light drilled out from his body, submerging him within. This blood-red light seemed to have a mind of its own. It flew down on its own, falling onto the damaged parts of the array diagram. It wriggled and fused into it, repairing it. All around the altar, several people with blood dripping from their hands revealed expressions of sorrow. As they looked at the old ancestor being submerged in the blood-red light, most of the resentment in their hearts dissipated. Perhaps it was as the old ancestor had said. This was the mission of their bloodline, and it had already been decided long ago. Closing their eyes, several people silently stirred the blood-red light in their palms. The humming from within the altar became even louder, adding a bit more strength to it. Golden runes slowly grew out from the damaged parts of the array diagram. When it was completely repaired, the blood-red light above the altar suddenly converged. The old man had vanished from sight, leaving behind nothing but ashes. He had used his life to repair the array diagram, exhausting everything. Bang! The golden runes shined brightly, condensing into a golden beam of light that smashed into the heavens. It shattered space, connecting to some unknown place. The cultivators standing around the altar with their eyes closed suddenly stiffened. Faint traces of ash gray rose up from beneath their feet, quickly spreading to every part of their bodies. This color was extremely gloomy and exuded a sense of extermination. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew up. Just like the old man, their bodies disintegrated in the wind. There wasn't even the slightest bit of life left. Jean Lingtian struggled to stand up straight, his expression deep with grief. Lin Weiwei's eyes were red, and large drops of tears flowed down her cheeks. The bloodline of the Emperor clan had withered, and there were only a few left. Today, another bloodline would be cut off. Was it really worth it for the Emperor's seal? But this was her big brother's decision, and the clan had prepared for this for countless years. She had no way of questioning him. She could only follow him and remember everything that happened today. If the Emperor clan truly returned to their glory one day, then those who sacrificed themselves today would receive the honor and glory they deserved. A golden beam of light shot out from the altar, shattering space and connecting to some unknown place. Invisible waves of energy swept out in all directions. However, this altar seemed to have an invisible strength that covered up space, not allowing the outside world to know what was happening. After a moment, a giant bronze coffin flew out from the shattered space. There wasn't the slightest bit of decoration on its surface, as if the person buried within disdained to use any external objects to show off their dignity. From this alone, it could be seen just how arrogant the person who was buried here was when they were alive. Jean Lingtian's complexion changed. This was because the scene in front of him was completely different from what he knew. There was no Emperor's seal at all. Why would this bronze coffin descend through the altar? He grabbed on a Lin Weiwei and turned to leave. Although he didn't know what was in the bronze coffin, he could feel an endless pressure pressing down on his heart. But before the two of them could leave, the entire space froze over. An invisible dignity carried with it a vast and terrifying aura, imprisoning this part of the world. The bronze coffin fell onto the altar. The heaven-shaking aura it released suddenly vanished without a trace. Although Zhang Lingtian regained his freedom, he didn't flee with Lin Weiwei. Instead, he respectfully knelt down and kowtowed. If he wanted to kill them, he could have done so just now. Since he held back, there must be some other reason. Of course, the most important point was that after experiencing the might of the bronze coffin, Zhang Lingtian didn't have the slightest confidence that he could escape with his little sister. If so, then he might as well stay put. Creak! With a light sound, the bronze coffin's lid opened. A pale white hand reached out and grabbed onto the coffin. From the coffin, a middle-aged man walked out. He wore an emperor crown and 9 dragon robes. His eyes surged with divine light, as if he could control the sun, moon, and stars with a single movement. Within this bronze coffin was a great emperor. His entire body was filled with death energy, but he still retained a trace of vitality. Life and death energies intertwined, diametrically opposed to each other. But they flowed freely, forming a system of their own, stable and unending. It was truly strange. His eyes fell on Zhang Lingtian and Lin Weiwei. His eyes flashed, and he said, "How many years have passed since the founding of the nation? How is the power of the nation?" Zhang Lingtian was excited. Although he found it hard to believe, he had already recognized that this great emperor in front of him, who seemed to have come back from the dead, was the founding ruler. The portrait enshrined in the ancestral temple and the jade slip that had been passed down to this day were exactly the same as the person in front of him. Moreover, that emperor aura that suppressed the highest heavens couldn't be faked at all. Reporting to the ancestor ruler, the Great Zhou has been founded for 25 million years, and the country has collapsed for 40 million years. The emperor clans have withered, and there is only a single city left. Bang! The altar shook and the skies changed colors. Fog tumbled, as if a million divine mountains were condensing and descending. Zhang Lingtian's body shivered. He spat out a mouthful of blood, his face deathly pale. The founding emperor was enraged. "When I was buried, I left behind a posthumous edict. If the country is unstable, I can be awakened from my slumber. How dare you disrespect me?" Zhang Lingtian didn't dare to argue. He only lowered his head and admitted his crimes. Luckily, that sky-toppling aura soon dispersed. The founding emperor had a gloomy expression. "Speak. What happened? There had to be some accident." Zhang Lingtian suppressed the discomfort in his body. He respectfully said, 40 million years ago, the empire was filled with the smoke of war. The ancestors of my clan wanted to summon the emperor's seal to support the destiny of the nation. As for what happened, no one knows. All I know is that the summoning process didn't go smoothly, and all the ancestors that participated died in a single day. At that time, the empire was in a precarious situation. After this strike, it was unable to recover. A million years of war later, the land was divided into 7. Then, he explained the current situation of the 7 empires in the land of divinity and demons. As Zhang Lingtian finished speaking, he carefully glanced at the silent ancestor sovereign, his mind in chaos. The emperor's seal that was passed down through the generations and could obtain the destiny of the emperor was actually the founding emperor. If the nation was unstable and the ancestor sovereign was awakened, could the Great Zhou dynasty be preserved? But this hypothesis no longer held any meaning. No matter what the reason was, the Great Zhou dynasty had already been destroyed for 30 million years. After a long silence, the founding emperor looked up. Divine light surged in his eyes, as if he had crossed through the river of time and returned to the distant past. After a long time, he gently sighed, as if he had gained some enlightenment. "I fought for millions of years and finally unified the world. I established a transcendent cause, combining my body with the destiny of the nation to suppress all. Because of this feeling, in order to avoid calamity, I fell into a deep slumber, but I didn't expect that I wouldn't be able to preserve the Emperor clan and continue the inheritance of the nation. His eyes fell. Rise. The two of you have awakened me from my slumber and have performed a great merit for the Emperor clan. In the future, you will be rewarded. Zhang Lingtian and Lin Weiwei hurriedly knelt down in thanks. The founding emperor flicked his sleeves, and an invisible strength wrapped around the two of them. He put away the bronze coffin and stepped out, vanishing from sight. In capital, Great Chu Imperial Palace, His Majesty the Emperor sat alone in a secret chamber. He looked at the star atlas, at the bright star that suddenly lit up. His eyes were dignified. There were 7 emperor stars in the world, but now an 8th had appeared. Moreover, it was so bright that the instant it appeared, it erupted with light that nearly covered the entire star atlas. The 8th emperor of the world. No, perhaps he should be called the first emperor of all eternity. The ancient rumors were true. The one who established the Great Zhou dynasty, the one who ruled over all the heavens, was actually still alive. Although he was already prepared in his heart, as he witnessed this scene with his own eyes, endless waves were set off in the emperor's powerful mind. After a long time, Mi Ganyuan took a deep breath. He suppressed the tumbling waves in his heart, and his eyes burst out with confidence. So what if the founding emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty was called the first emperor of all eternity? The current world was no longer the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty. He was the most powerful emperor in this world. If everything went smoothly, he could borrow the power of purgatory to suppress him, refine his flesh and blood, and plunder his imperial destiny. He would have a chance of inheriting the transcendent emperor godhood and obtaining the approval of the heavens and earth. At that time, what did the immortal sect or demonic path matter? Unifying the world wasn't without hope. On the long snake stone tablet, black flames rose up in the skeleton's eye sockets. He was silent for a long time, and then he sighed. He is truly worthy of being the Chu Empire's great emperor. He actually has such courage and breadth of mind to do such extraordinary things. 12 stone tablets appeared. Everything within the sea of purgatory could be sensed. The solemn Chu Emperor dares to do such a dangerous thing for the sake of his great cause. Since I know of this, how can I not lend you a helping hand? In the peaceful and stable land of divinity and demons, how could it accommodate a race that had been expelled for 1 trillion years? Only when the world was in chaos and everyone was in danger would there be no one who would care about them. The Chu Emperor had placed down a piece and opened a great chess game. He naturally had to add fuel to the fire and not miss out on this heaven-sent opportunity. The skeleton lifted a hand and slapped it. The stone tablets beneath him trembled. The 12 stone tablets connected together, and their auras erupted at the same time. Originally, he was still hiding his aura, but now he didn't hold it back anymore. Deep within the sea of purgatory, there was an extremely terrifying and alluring aura that leapt into his senses. Of course, not everyone had the qualifications to touch upon this aura. Only when one's strength reached a certain level and touched upon the source of the world would they be able to sense its existence. In the darkness, pairs of deep eyes suddenly opened. Some were shaken, some were puzzled, but without exception, all of them were filled with joy. No matter what the reason was, hadn't they waited for endless years for this moment? Bang, bang. Aura after aura erupted from all over the sea of purgatory. Each aura was so solid that it seemed tangible. Like a burning beacon, it shot into the skies. Within the entire sea of purgatory, all living beings trembled. From the depths of their souls, endless fear rose up. After the Chu Emperor and the mysterious skeleton placed down their pieces, the true great waves arrived. Countless people were frightened, and their complexions paled. Although they didn't know what was happening, a great fear rose up in their hearts. The reason for that was because each and every one of those auras were capable of easily crushing them to dust. Within a temporary cave dwelling, Qin Yu's eyes flashed open. A divine light flashed within them, filled with a shaking intent. He lowered his head, his eyes widening as if he had seen something unbelievable. Sea of Purgatory, Sea of Purgatory. So this was the true origin of its name. That's right, at this moment, Qin, you could feel a magnificent aura being released from deep underground. His cultivation boundary was indeed lacking, but within his soul space, whether it was the cosmic sea cross bell or the purple moon, both of them could make up for this deficiency. I never thought it would be hidden here. Undying whispered. Qin Yu suddenly sensed something. He turned and saw that the woman had woken up. There wasn't a hint of panic on her face. Her cold eyes swept over Qin Yu before looking down at her feet. She had also sensed it. This good fortune is not something you can covet. Otherwise, you will only be throwing your life away. An icy voice came out from between her teeth, without the least bit of warmth. Xin Yuanin stood up and walked out. She didn't say a word of thanks or even glance at him. Qin Yu's lips twitched. This was indeed this woman's style. Undying's voice sounded out in his mind. She is right. With Master's current cultivation, you do not have the qualifications to interfere in this struggle for good fortune. Her tone was filled with unwillingness. Qin Yu frowned. Just what is it? You seem to know. Undying bitterly smiled. I can't say. What? With Master's current cultivation, it is impossible for you to know of its existence. Now that you have sensed it through other methods, you have already broken through the taboo. If you probe any further and trigger a resonance of energy, you will surely provoke a disaster. Qin Yu's heart trembled and all the hairs on his back stood up. At this moment, it seemed as if some sort of attention had fallen upon him. Without further explanation, he already believed Undying's words. It was just that it was hard to imagine that there was something in this world that he didn't have the qualifications to know about. If he were to forcefully probe it, a great calamity might befall him. This is true good fortune. Undying couldn't help but say. Qin Yu was silent. He could clearly feel the other party's sigh from these words. Was he being looked down on because his cultivation was too weak? For someone who could at least fight a calamity immortal for better or worse, it was hard for him to accept this sort of signal. Right now, Undying clearly didn't care about what Qin Yu thought. He bluntly said, Master, there will be great changes in the Sea of Purgatory. You cannot stay here any longer. Before his voice fell, terrifying auras erupted like volcanoes in the darkness. With peerless and tyrannical postures, they broke into his senses. These auras were strong, each one heaven-shaking and earth-shattering. One even suspected that if they were to collide, the entire world would be destroyed. Qin Yu's complexion changed several times. The sour feeling in his heart instantly vanished. Compared to these auras, he was far, far too weak. Standing in front of them, while he wasn't much different from an ant, he wasn't much harder than an egg. He feared that with just a little bit of strength, he would be torn to pieces. Helplessness flashed in his eyes. But Qin Yu knew that Undying was right. He really couldn't stay in the current Sea of Purgatory any longer. With these terrifying auras appearing one after another, who knew what would happen next? If he didn't leave, once he was sucked in, he would die without a doubt. If he lost Shuoba, he could still find a chance. But if he died, everything would be for naught. He lifted his hand. Light flashed, and several jade archives appeared in his hand. Each one was of the highest quality jade. After they were refined, they shined with a dazzling light. Tiny runes tumbled within the light. Before entering the Sea of Purgatory, the great Chu imperial family had bestowed a similar set of jade archives to everyone. With these jade archives, they could lay down a miniature array formation that resonated with Ing Capital's great array formation and teleport away. With a thought, the jade archives flew up, forming an array formation in the void. Qin Yu lifted a hand and poured magic power into them, activating them. Jade archives lit up and faint fluctuations appeared in space. But this time, an inexplicable aura arrived, disrupting the array formation. With a series of cracking sounds, the jade archives shattered one after another. On the stone tablet, Black flames danced in the skeleton's eye sockets. His lips parted as if he were smiling. Little fellows, for the sake of this liveliness, in order to achieve the best results, I will have to leave you behind. Perhaps you will die, but to be able to see peak powerhouses that have accumulated for hundreds of millions of years release their final energy, you should feel honored. Enjoy this grand ceremony. Shen Yuanin suddenly stopped. A group of panic-stricken cultivators appeared in her line of sight. This was because it wasn't just Qin Yu who had tried to leave the Sea of Purgatory. It was clear that all of them had failed. No one knew what had happened. But it was because of their ignorance that they were even more terrified. Those that had fallen into panic and despair needed a place to vent. Shen Yuanin's appearance at this time was undoubtedly the best choice. It's all because of that slut. No one knew who said this, but everyone subconsciously acknowledged this point. If it weren't for her, how could they have gathered here? If they hadn't gathered here, perhaps this despairing scene wouldn't have occurred. This logic was far-fetched and even completely unreasonable. But in this situation, what meaning did logic have? Kill her. Those that were in despair could often erupt with an even more terrifying destructive power. If one considered things from the dark side, perhaps these people were thinking that even if they had to die here, they had to kill her first. It was like if they killed Shen Yuanin, they would have one more scapegoat. You see, even if they all had to die, at least someone would die in front of them, right? A terrifying aura pierced through space. Dazzling divine light illuminated the world, illuminating Shen Yuanin's pale face as well as her furrowed eyebrows. At this moment, she was at a loss. Death was about to arrive. Had she ever left a mark in this world? Great waves rose up in her mind. Fragmented images splashed into her mind. Shen Yuanin stiffened. Before the overwhelming killing intent arrived, she spat out a mouthful of blood. This was the backlash of the sublime lost emotion code. Behind her, Qin Yu was stunned. He looked at Shen Yuanin, suddenly finding a familiar feeling in her cold and strange back. His mind throbbed, and an intense impulse erupted from the depths of his heart. Without any time to think or hesitate, his body instinctively responded. Bang! A formidable strength erupted, directly twisting space. Qin Yu's figure fell in front of Shen Yuanin like a mountain. He lifted a hand and pressed forward. Deep blue light erupted, instantly forming the phantom of an endless sea region. Then, that blinding light, carrying with it a terrifying destructive strength, smashed into it. The sea region phantom violently trembled, instantly on the verge of collapse. Qin Yu stuffily coughed as blood flowed out from his nose and mouth. But he didn't take half a step back. He allowed the wild pressure to press down on him, causing his joints to crackle. Kacha! Kacha! The sea region phantom that was on the verge of collapse suddenly began to freeze over, instantly strengthening its defenses and sharing some of Qin Yu's pressure. Shen Yuanin's complexion paled and her eyes dimmed. She had exhausted all of her strength. She and Qin Yu were on this side. Across from them was a group of crazed cultivators, and in the middle was a frozen sea. Qin Yu looked at the frozen sea. His thoughts stirred and strange syllables echoed in his mind. Above his head, the sea chart slowly unfurled. A transcendent and noble aura emitted from his body. He lifted his hand and pointed down. Bang! A terrifying beam of light tore through the skies. With unparalleled momentum, it suddenly descended. Beneath it, cultivators widened their eyes, endless fear in their eyes. But beneath this beam of light, let alone resisting, they couldn't even form thoughts of escaping. The ground fiercely shook. Great waves rose up, rolling out in all directions. A 10,000-foot wide hole appeared. It was pitch black, so deep that one couldn't see it. The cultivators that had been standing here had all disappeared. There was a light cracking sound in Qin Yu's mind. Then he felt a sharp pain, as if a sharp wooden stake had ruthlessly stabbed into him. His complexion paled, without the least bit of blood left. He closed his eyes. Before his consciousness fell into complete darkness, Qin Yu felt himself fall into the arms of a soft and delicate body. A faint fragrance entered his nose. It was strange, but it caused his heart to race. He only felt that it was very soft, but what a pity, he fainted in the next moment. Chapter 579/P. After seeing the terrifying hole in the ground that seemed to lead straight to the 9 nether realms, the group chasing Shun Yuan dispersed. What nonsense! Although the current situation wasn't right, and they might die here, who would be willing to die here until the final moment? What there was a chance to live? Even if they were doomed to die, dying late was better than dying early. Continue to chase? What a joke! This was simply sending their head from 1,000 miles away. Sang Zhu paled, and her eyes filled with fear. If Shun Yuan didn't die, then even if she could leave the sea of purgatory alive, her fate would still be miserable. Although the Qi Empire was one of the 7 great empires, ever since it was founded, it had always been supported by the Immortal Sect. Although the Immortal Sect recognized the dignity of the empire, it was impossible to resolve the matter of plotting to kill a direct disciple. Moreover, the stronger Shun Yuan was, the higher her status was in the Immortal Sect. The 17th Prince, Sang Ke, frowned. He couldn't care about the cultivators that were scattering away. Light surged in the depths of his eyes. Thus, the events that occurred not too long ago were replayed in reverse, as if you were looking back in time. Because the strength was far too terrifying, it caused the surrounding aura to distort and the scene to be incomplete. But he could still make out the approximate course of events. He saw Qin Yu attack, the slowly unfolding sea map, and the terrifying beam of light that crashed down from the heavens. His body instinctively stiffened. Although there was no expression on his face, great waves began to rise in his heart. He was actually the one chosen by God. This was troublesome. He didn't doubt the strength of a spiritual God, especially the might of that beam of light. Even though it was only a phantom image, he could still feel the destructive strength contained within. Even he wouldn't be able to withstand the bombardment of that beam of light. This was an extremely powerful spiritual God. Even though it had already perished, the remnant divine might was still terrifying. Sang Ke clenched his teeth and revealed an unwillingness in his eyes. But he knew that he couldn't continue chasing, otherwise he might encounter a life or death crisis. He turned around and restrained all his emotions. He lightly said, "Royal sister, let's go." Sang Zhu was in trance. She subconsciously nodded, the fear in her heart increasing. What to do? What to do? As she followed behind Sang Ke, her thoughts raced. Since she was a child, Sang Zhu wasn't someone who was willing to accept her fate. Otherwise, she wouldn't have tossed and turned for so many years. If she didn't do anything and just waited for the final result to arrive, that would be impossible. 17th brother, Sang Ke stopped. "What's the matter, sister?" Sang Zhu steadied her mind and said, "In Brother 17's opinion, what level of strength is needed to create that deep hole in the ground?" Sang Ke frowned. "It can kill calamity immortals." Even if the shockwaves had already dispersed, there was still some residual qi in the mud and stones at the edge of the deep cave. It wasn't difficult to make such a judgment. Sang Zhu's eyes brightened. The Great Chu's Sea of Purgatory is connected to Ink Capital's Great Array Formation. It is rumored to be related to the destiny of the Chu Empire. It is of utmost importance. Brother 17, do you think they will allow Calamity Immortals to enter? Sang Ke raised an eyebrow. "My royal sister means," Sang Zhu said decisively. "It's very simple." He didn't know what method that woman used to unleash such terrifying strength, but it was definitely her life-saving trump card. Let's not talk about the price she would have to pay to use this trump card. Since she used this technique, she must be at the end of her rope. Brother 17th, everyone retreated in fear, but they never thought that this might be the best time to kill her. If this woman is not eliminated, even if you and I are of the direct bloodline of the Emperor clan, we will still be in great trouble. Her last words vaguely reminded Sang Ke that the two of them were grasshoppers tied to the same rope. Sang Ke's eyes brightened, and he smiled. He said in a soft voice, "I was indeed confused. Thank you, royal sister, for the reminder." He was well aware that the one who attacked wasn't that woman, but another strange man. But Sang Zhu's words weren't wrong. Even if it was the one chosen by God, if he were to erupt with such a terrifying power, he would still have suffered serious losses. Perhaps he was currently in an extremely weakened state. If he could kill the one chosen by God, divine spark. Thinking of this, Sang Ke's heart burned with a burning heat. Sang Zhu was overjoyed. That's right. Brother 17th is tyrannical. If little sister is willing to help you, you will definitely be able to kill her. Sang Ke smiled. Then, I must thank royal sister. Before his voice fell, he lifted a hand and grabbed onto Sang Zhu. A dark and gloomy aura rapidly drilled into her body. Sang Zhu stiffened. Her eyes filled with horror. Brother 17th, what is the meaning of this? Emperor clans couldn't harm each other, otherwise they would suffer a bloodline backlash. Everyone knew this, so she had been careless. Sang Ke licked his lips, his tongue bright red. Of course it's to be intimate with my royal sister. As he spoke, he leaned over and kissed her lips. Sang Zhu's eyes flashed with anger and shame before she immediately suppressed it. She no longer had a pure body, so this wasn't difficult for her to accept. Moreover, in the emperor clans, in order to protect their bloodline inheritance, it was common for close relatives to marry. However, she would remember this matter. If she had a chance in the future, she would make him suffer a fate worse than death. Her heart filled with hatred, but Sang Zhu's body had already gone limp. Her breathing was rapid, her face flushed red, and she had a passionate appearance. But at this time, her eyes widened, and she wildly struggled in panic. Gulp, gulp, there was the sound of great gulps. Sang Zhu's body rapidly withered away. Even as her eyes glazed over, she still couldn't believe what had happened. Sang Ke had actually dared to kill her, and she really would die here. Pada! Sang Zhu's withered corpse was casually tossed to the ground. Sang Ke had a satisfied expression. He lay down on the ground and cleanly ate her flesh and skin. After starving himself, only then did he realize that food wasn't easy to come by. He couldn't waste it. After licking the gaps between his teeth, Sang Ke destroyed the skeleton and erased all traces. Then he patted his clothes and relaxed. They were truly worthy of being descendants of the emperor clans. All of them tasted quite good. He closed his eyes and digested and absorbed the memories he obtained from Sang Zhu. After several breaths of time, Sang Ke's eyes lit up with joy. That little girl actually had a pure body. Sang Zhu's receiving body had already benefited him greatly. If he could obtain a pure body as well, perhaps he would be able to complete his transformation. This was a pleasant surprise. Although the divine spark was good, its divine might was too heavy. He originally had some scruples in his heart, but if he could complete his transformation, his chances of fusing with the divine spark would be much higher. Sang Ke's eyes flashed. Suddenly, a light flashed, and he thought of an idea. If he could do it properly, he might be able to achieve his goal without taking too many risks. After thinking about it for a long time and determining that it was feasible, Sang Ke smiled in satisfaction. A layer of black water gushed out and wrapped around him. When the black water scattered, another divine essence voice appeared. Whether it was the aura or the movements, it was exactly the same. How was this Sang Ke? This was clearly the water demon that lived in the sea of purgatory. What Sang Zhu couldn't figure out was actually very simple. Her cheap brother 17 had already become food for the water demon. Thinking about it, it must have borrowed Sang Ke's identity to act more conveniently. Sensing with his mind, he determined Shun Yuanin's position. The water demon's figure moved, turning into a mass of black fog that howled in pursuit. Qin Yu felt as if he had a wonderful dream. Everything in the dream was blurry, but that soft and warm feeling left him intoxicated. He subconsciously wanted to touch it more clearly. Then he felt as if he were falling down a cliff. After a rapid fall, he crashed into the ground. His heart shook, his body ached, and he felt an icy cold sensation. Qin Yu woke up. He hurriedly opened his eyes and met Shun Yuanin's indifferent gaze. Her complexion became increasingly cold, and a dangerous aura tumbled around her. It seemed that if it weren't for the fact that she wasn't feeling well, she would have rushed over and slapped him several times already. Qin was puzzled, but when his eyes fell onto Shun Yuanin's chest, there was a dim palm print on her white dress that was particularly striking. Although he didn't compare it, Qin instantly knew that if he pressed his hand against it, it would absolutely fit perfectly. This was just too embarrassing. After a second of daze, Qin immediately looked away. He coughed and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist, for saving me." At this time, pretending to be confused was the only choice. Otherwise, if things were really made clear, how could they still interact? However, he was clearly the one who saved her, so why was he so muddle-headed that he had to thank her? Qin bitterly smiled. His mind raced with all sorts of thoughts, leaving him in a state of chaos. He thought back to the familiar feeling he felt from this woman before he fainted. But looking at her now, she was nothing more than a walking lump of ice, so cold that it was frightening. Could this be a demonic barrier? Or could it be that he had really awakened his potential to become a hungry demon? Shun Yuanin grit her teeth. Even she didn't realize that compared to before, she seemed a bit more human. Qin was the first to speak, breaking the silence. "Fellow Taoist, how is your condition?" "Shut up," Shun Yuanin coldly said, a hint of anger in her voice. After speaking, she was stunned for a moment and then closed her eyes. Although he was scolded, Qin actually relaxed. As long as he said the first sentence, he could just let nature take its course in the future. Seeing that Shun Yuanin didn't want to speak further, he was happy. He closed his eyes and sensed the state of his body. A moment later, he groaned inwardly. Although his confrontation with everyone had only lasted for a short period of time, no matter how strong his path of water was, it was impossible for him to contend with the combined attacks of so many people. The path of water had condensed to sea phantom, and after being frozen by Shun Yuanin, it became even more real. But in the end, it wasn't a true sea region. Perhaps sensing that Qin was in a desperate situation, the divine spark forcefully galvanized it, causing a terrifying beam of light to descend. But in the end, he still had to pay the appropriate price. For instance, Qin extremely weak soul. Master is taking too many risks. Undying's gloomy voice sounded out, a warning in his voice. He had already bet his final chance on Qin. For instance, Qin extremely weak soul. He had already bet his final chance on Qin. If something happened to him, he would be beyond redemption. How could he calmly deal with the fact that Qin had disregarded his own life and forcefully attacked? If it weren't for Purple Moon and the cosmic sea cross bell resisting the backlash of the divine spark at the critical moment, even if Qin didn't die, he would still be an idiot. Qin could sense the weak auras of Purple Moon and the cosmic sea cross bell. He felt a deep sense of guilt in his heart. "It was my fault. I won't do it again." He didn't defend himself. Rather, he blocked Undying's next words. He wanted to remind Qin not to be captivated by beauty, but after hesitating again and again, he didn't say anything. In truth, Undying was also surprised. After knowing Qin for so many years, he naturally knew that Qin wasn't someone who lusted after beauty. But now, in front of this woman, why did he always lose his sense of propriety? Could it be that this brat Qin was born with a love for ice beauties, and now that he encountered one, his masochistic tendencies were activated? As Qin was ashamed, he didn't know that Undying was secretly looking at him with a strange expression. He opened his eyes and glanced at Shun Yuanin, who was cultivating. Then, he swept his eyes around and saw that she had already made arrangements to isolate his aura. He took out the 9th province furnace to add another layer of protection. Qin took out some pills and swallowed them down. Most of them were used to restore the soul. The Emperor-level demon body had an amazing regenerative ability. Compared to bodily injuries, soul injuries were undoubtedly more important. The two of them were silent. The space around them quieted down, and Qin breathing gradually calmed down. It was just that he never imagined that as someone who was always cautious, he would place so much trust in Shun Yuanin. At this time, Shun Yuanin opened her eyes. She glanced at Qinyu. Her eyes were still faint, but deep within them, there was a complex light. A mass of black water fell onto the ground and rose up, turning into a figure. This was Shun Yuanin's figure. She coldly glared at the cave in front of her. It was here. She closed her eyes, and an invisible aura spread out. A light breeze appeared in the air, bringing with it a faint moisture. After several breaths of time, she opened her eyes, her expression dignified. That person chosen by God was really still here. After thinking for a moment, Shun Yuanin took a step back. Her body became illusory as she melted into the shadows. Several breaths of time later, another gust of wind appeared in the air. It wasn't as gentle as before, but a bit colder and more austere. It wasn't a hide. Rather, it was the exact opposite. It wanted the people in the cave to sense that something was wrong outside. Shun Yuanin and Qinyu opened their eyes at nearly the same time. Their gazes met, and they looked towards the cave entrance. Since that aura just now had penetrated in, it must have discovered them. I'll go take a look. Shun Yuanin stood up and walked outside. Qinyu hesitated for a moment, but didn't say anything. He was well aware of his current condition. If he followed, he would only add to the chaos. It was just that although this woman's aura seemed to have recovered a bit, the feeling she gave off wasn't too good. He hoped that there wouldn't be any problems. Bang! Fierce fluctuations of aura erupted from outside the cave. Qinyu's complexion changed. Shun Yuanin staggered backwards. Her face was pale, and her clothes were dyed red with blood. Her aura was weak to the extreme. Before he could respond, another person flew into the cave. She wore white clothes, and her face was covered with a veil. Her expression was cold and indifferent, like a goddess descending from the highest heavens. Shun Yuanin, too. Qinyu subconsciously widened his eyes. Shun Yuanin, who had retreated into the cave, coldly said, "Who are you and why are you pretending to be me?" The other Shun Yuanin was expressionless. Die! With a flick of her sleeves, the air instantly froze over. An icy cold spread outwards. The blood-stained Shun Yuanin lifted a hand, and another extreme cold erupted. The two sides collided in the void. Kacha! Kacha! Massive layers of ice appeared in the air. A layer of white frost rapidly spread throughout the surface of the cave. Qinyu shivered and instantly regained his composure. But no matter how he sensed it, the two Shun Yuanians were exactly the same. But in this world, how could there be such a farce as killing oneself? For a time, his complexion paled. Kill her! Kill her! The two Shun Yuanians confronted each other. Whether it was the shape of their mouths or the syllables, if it weren't for the difference in timing, it would have been like looking into a mirror. Undying, of the two of them, which one is the real one? After several breaths of silence, Undying said, "I can't tell." He could sense that the two Shun Yuanians were exactly the same, as if they were duplicates. Before Qinyu could ask, Mimi's weak voice sounded out, "I can't see any difference between her and Big Sister Purple Moon. You have to be careful." Beads of sweat dripped down Qinyu's forehead. To be able to deceive Undying and the others, the one who knew the truth, was absolutely terrifying. But if such a terrifying person wanted to harm them, they could just directly attack. With his and Shun Yuanin's current condition, it was impossible for them to contend with her, so why would they need to put on such a play? Unless the other party felt some fear and didn't dare to attack. Qinyu instantly thought of the sea chart he summoned and the terrifying beam of light that came crashing down. The other party must have seen the terrifying strength contained in that strike. Thinking of this, Qinyu felt a rush of urgency. He knew that he had to respond as soon as possible. Otherwise, once the fake Shun Yuanin saw through their depths, all that awaited them would be death. If he couldn't distinguish the real from the fake, then he could only rely on his luck. Qinyu took a deep breath and closed his eyes. His soul had been severely injured, and he had nearly lost his ability to sense things. Right now, he could only open his mind and sense the aura in the air. Two masses of ice-cold strength were like incomparably proud icebergs on a snowy plain. Their auras were completely the same. Slow down a bit, slowed down a bit more. The frequency of the aura fluctuations was infinitely magnified. In the cave, the two Shun Yuanyins were expressionless. They knew that Qin Yu was making his judgment. Time slowly passed. The temperature became increasingly low, and a thick layer of white frost covered Qin Yu's entire body. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. The white frost scattered in all directions, revealing Qin Yu's figure. His eyes opened, and the awe-inspiring aura within them left one's heart shaking. "Evil beast, you are seeking death." A loud shout, like a thunderclap, exploded in the cave. Above Qin Yu's head, the sea chart phantom slowly opened. His eyes fell on the bloodstained Shun Yuanin, and he lifted a hand. Bang! Black water erupted, instantly forcing Shun Yuanin back. Like a shadow, she drilled into the earth and vanished. Qin Yu clenched his teeth. "You bastard! You actually let her run away." He looked at Shun Yuanin, his tone unfriendly. "I told you to hold her back, so why didn't you restrain her?" Shun Yuanin spat out a mouthful of blood. A trace of fluctuation appeared in her indifferent eyes. "My injuries are too heavy, and you took far too long to prepare." Qin Yu coldly coughed. "This wretch is too strong. If I had hastily attacked, the most I would have done was wound. The reason I did this was to eliminate any future troubles." How hateful! I was only a single step away. If she had run any slower, she would have died here. Shun Yuanin said, "What do we do now?" Qin Yu's complexion was cloudy and uncertain. "After today's events, this wretch will definitely be on guard. Wanting to lure it in again will be extremely difficult. Let's leave this place first." Shun Yuanin nodded, not speaking. It was unknown what cultivation method she cultivated, but besides being ice-cold, her toughness was also ridiculously high. In a short period of time, she had restored some of her origin energy. At least on the surface, besides her pale complexion, she didn't seem weak at all. "Humph!" Qin Yu flicked his sleeves and put away the 9th province furnace. Shun Yuanin followed behind him. After leaving the cave, Qin Yu pulled Shun Yuanin and stepped into the shadows. The two of them instantly vanished from sight. A moment later, faint traces of black water vapor seeped out from the cracks in the cave. They gathered in midair, condensing into the figure of a water demon. Its slender eyes stared towards the entrance of the cave. While it was surprised, it was also filled with joy. The art of infinite transformation was its innate talent. As long as one had seen it before, they could imitate it without any flaws. Even if a calamity immortal were in front of it, they still wouldn't be able to distinguish it. But now, it had been easily seen through. The water demon was even more certain that the divine spirit that had perished was absolutely terrifyingly strong. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for it to have such a keen divine sense. Luckily, it had reacted quickly, otherwise it feared it would have died here today. As it thought about how it was a hidden hunter, it had nearly been hunted down instead. The water demon felt depressed. However, compared to preserving its life, a bit of depression wasn't anything at all. When Qin Yu left, he was still able to bring Shun Yuanin along with him and use some sort of teleportation technique. This dispelled the last bit of hesitation in its heart. What bullshit killing someone while they were weak. That cheap slut Sang Zhu had dug a hole for him even before she died. After using Shadow Step dozens of times, the blood in his body tumbled, and the stabbing pain in his soul caused his field of vision to darken. Only when he determined he couldn't persist any longer did Qin Yu stop. When he turned around, Shun Yuanin, who had been silent this entire time and had allowed him to pull her along, finally fell to the ground with her eyes closed. Qin Yu exerted strength and pulled her into his arms. This small movement caused his chest to tumble. Finally, he wasn't able to hold back and spat out a mouthful of blood. Drops of blood splashed onto Shun Yuanin's white dress, like plum blossoms in the snow. Several drops fell on her cheeks, making the contrast with her pale complexion even more obvious. Qin Yu inwardly apologized for his offense. He reached out a hand and wiped away the blood. When his fingers touched her cheeks, they were cold and soft. However, in his current state, it was hard for him to have any blasphemous thoughts. Looking at the sleeping Shun Yuanin, Qin Yu bitterly smiled. Even something like fainting had to be done first. He also wanted to blissfully faint. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, the heaviness in his chest eased a little. Chinyu took a deep breath and held her as he walked into the distance. In their current state, it wasn't suitable for them to move about. If their luck was bad, even if they ran into some monster beast or evil being that they could casually destroy, they could still take their lives. Luckily, nothing happened after that. Chinyu stimulated his strength and opened up a hiding place with the path of metal. Then, he took out the 9th province furnace and let out a breath of relief. His soul twitched, and his body was exhausted to the point of death. Chinyu closed his eyes and instantly fell asleep. But now he couldn't relax. Although he had scared away the water demon just now, who knew when it would react? Chinyu rubbed between his eyebrows and said, "Undying, find out what's wrong with this woman." The first time, not long after Shen Yuanin left, she had encountered a group of cultivators, and now they had caught up to her. If this was a coincidence, then it was far too much of a coincidence. There was definitely something wrong. After pausing for several breaths of time and not receiving a response, Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows. "Undying?" This time, a weak voice sounded out. "Yes, I am Undying. Master, place your hand on her." Chinyu was startled. He immediately felt ashamed. Before this, he had only been concerned with escaping and had pulled Shen Yuanin along the way, using Shadow Step dozens of times. No matter how tyrannical Undying's strength was, he must have suffered severe losses. It was no wonder he hadn't responded. In such a state, he shouldn't have bothered him. If he didn't eliminate this woman's hidden danger, he feared more problems would arise. "I've troubled you." Sensing the apology in Chinyu's words, Undying sighed with emotion. "It's good that you're fine. Just how dangerous had the situation been?" To be able to rely on an empty city strategy to scare away the water demon was already a stroke of luck. Chinyu didn't speak further. He lifted a hand and placed it on Shen Yuanin's body. "Let's begin." Luckily, even though he had lost a great deal of strength, he still had his undying realm. After spending some time, he finally discovered something. Search 3 inches below her chest with your magic power. Find the cold energy and pull it out. Undying fell silent. He really needed to fall into a deep sleep as soon as possible to restore his strength. Chinyu revealed an awkward expression. Although he said 3 inches below her chest, looking at the woman in front of him, he found it difficult to do so. "This is a matter of life or death. I apologize for offending you." He reached out a finger. Even though he was prepared, a soft feeling still spread through his body and he stiffened. Luckily, his mind was strong enough. He immediately restrained his thoughts and carefully probed her with his magic power. Soon, he found the cold energy. Chinyu was overjoyed. He revolved his magic power to wrap it up, but at this time, a change occurred. The cold energy seemed to sense something was wrong and suddenly exploded. Chinyu was caught off guard, and in addition to his weakened body, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Luckily, with the explosion, the mark on Shen Yuanin's body was also broken. 10,000 miles away, a black water vapor that was flying around suddenly froze. In the next moment, it crazily tumbled around. It clenched its teeth and roared, its voice filled with endless hatred. "You bastard, you actually dared to lie to me." The mark was left behind by the water demon, so it could naturally sense it. When it was broken just now, it discovered Chinyu's weakness. It naturally reacted and realized that what happened just now was nothing more than a scam. What was tragic was that it had fallen for it. It thought back to not too long ago when a pure body and a formidable godhead had been placed in front of it, but it had let them go on its own initiative. Regret gnawed at its heart like a viper. It could be said that at this moment, Chinyu was the person it hated the most in this world. "Oh, I will kill you. I will definitely kill you." Bang! A terrifying strength erupted, instantly sweeping out in all directions. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, Chinyu's fingers moved. He slowly opened his eyes and immediately realized that something was wrong. Cold. A cold that penetrated to the marrow. His entire body was nearly frozen stiff. As his eyes fell on Shun Yuanin, he found a reason. This woman's face didn't have any color at all. It was a translucent color, pale to the point that she looked like a true ice sculpture. A terrifying chill was constantly gushing out from her body. The temporary hiding place she had opened up had now turned into a world of ice and snow. Carefully sensing it, Shun Yuanin's aura had become extremely weak. She was like the flame of a match in a winter night, about to be extinguished at any moment. Something was wrong. Qin Yu didn't believe that this was because of her cultivation method. He had never heard of anyone turning themselves into a lifeless lump of ice when they cultivated. Thinking about how Shun Yuanin had collapsed, Qin Yu's complexion became dignified. It was likely that her injuries were too heavy, causing her strength to go out of control. Ignoring his own discomfort, Qin Yu stood up and walked over. He placed a hand on her body and immediately shivered. He hurriedly lifted his hand. Frost had already formed on his palm, spreading all the way to his wrist. Qin Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. Currently, this woman was like an ancient block of ice. As he moved his palm, there was a loud cracking sound as pieces of ice fell to the ground. His complexion became even more dignified. Indeed, she had lost control of her cultivation. He feared that if he didn't lend a helping hand, this woman would soon die from the backlash of her berserk strength. But now, the temperature around her was terrifyingly low. With Qin Yu's current condition, let alone saving her, he feared he would lose his life in vain. What should he do? Qin Yu paced back and forth several times. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. Although he didn't know whether or not this would work in the current situation, he could only try everything he could. He didn't dare to delay any longer. He walked over to Shun Yuanin's side. Suppressing the bone-chilling cold, he sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes, and with a thought, the demon body appeared. Blood energy erupted within his body, billowing like red magma. It raced through his body, emitting an astonishing heat. The bone-chilling cold outside, immediately weakened by a great deal, becoming bearable. Qin Yu's thoughts were simple. If Shun Yuanin was a block of ice, then he would become a ball of fire. Perhaps he could save her. Suddenly, a trace of icy cold energy drilled into his body, fusing together with the burning heat and turning into an extremely comfortable and gentle strength. Qin Yu was startled. He didn't know what was happening, but he carefully sensed that this gentle strength wasn't harmful to him. Thinking about it, he didn't stop. This was Shun Yuanin's only chance of survival. Whether or not he succeeded, he had to try. Even if they weren't friends, the two of them had experienced life and death situations together. He couldn't just ignore her. Even though he had woken up, Qin Yu was still incomparably weak. As the gentle strength spread through his body, after an unknown period of time, his consciousness became increasingly hazy, and he finally fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 580. Shun Yuanin controlled the power of Yin in the heavens. Wherever her thoughts went, an extreme cold would descend, freezing all life and delivering a death sentence. She never thought that one day she would be injured by the power of extreme cold and even lose her life. In a world of ice and snow, strong winds howled, rolling up the hard ice particles and causing them to crash against each other. Shun Yuanin wore white clothes. As she stood in the wind and snow, her figure seemed to be assimilated and submerged within. Her consciousness was very clear, and she knew that she was currently in a dream. However, this dream was a reflection of her current situation. Her cultivation was unstable, and she lost control of her strength. Once she was assimilated, her consciousness would dissipate, and she would turn into a mass of pure cold energy. For Shun Yuanin, once her consciousness dissipated, her soul would wither away. In the end, she feared that all that would be left behind would be a body covered in ice. The sublime lost emotion code obliterated all emotions. The only thing that remained was the fear of death. She had already tried her best to free herself from this dream and gather back her strength, but all her attempts were in vain. Shen Yuanin frowned. Her eyes revealed a bit of confusion and absent-mindedness. Could this be karmic retribution? She had obliterated her humanity and used extreme cold to kill others. Now, she would die in this extreme cold. Shen Yuanin closed her eyes, her expression indifferent. Since she couldn't escape, she could only quietly wait for death to arrive. She only hoped that before she died, that person would be smart enough to stay far away. Otherwise, if they were wrapped up in the erupting cold energy, they would likely die together with her. Was she worried? How could she have such disturbing emotions? Thinking about it, it must be because she was on the verge of death. As if sensing that Shen Yuanin had given up resisting, a thought of death bloomed in her heart. The strong winds between the heavens and earth became stronger and colder. Her body shivered. Her figure became even thinner, as if she would be swept away by the strong winds in the next moment. Her consciousness floated in and out of existence, as if it could dissipate at any moment. But suddenly, Shen Yuanin felt a trace of warmth. It was like a fire had been lit in a house of ice. At first it was weak, but as time passed, it burned more and more fiercely. Billowing waves of heat wrapped around her. Water vapor tumbled around her, and the thick layer of ice and snow beneath her feet began to melt. In this world of ice and snow, it was as if a dormant volcano had suddenly awakened. With its astonishing temperature, it caused the entire world to melt. Finally, the world that had become incomplete due to the melting of ice and snow collapsed with a loud bang. Mist rose from his hiding spot, and the thick layer of frost and snow had all melted away. Tiny beads of water hung from Shen Yuanin's long eyelashes. As she opened her eyes, they fell onto her face. Her white dress was soaked by the steam and stuck to her body, revealing her graceful figure. But right now, she didn't care about any of this. Her eyes fell on Qinyu, who was sitting not too far away. This man was like a sun, releasing powerful light and heat. Shen Yuanin's calm and tranquil heart was suddenly struck in a soft spot. She earnestly looked at this strange face in front of her, and emotions surged out from the depths of her heart. She raised her hand to cover her mouth. Blood stained her veil and dripped down through the gaps between her fingers. The supreme Wang Qing, since she had already forgotten, she would not allow it to happen again. Otherwise, the backlash from his cultivation technique would cause his soul to wither and he would die. He wore light blue robes and held a folding fan in his hand. He wore a square scarf on his head, and his steps were calm and steady. His every movement was graceful and magnanimous. Unfortunately, the gray skies above his head and the corpses of monster beasts littered the ground. The smell of blood wafted from his nose and mouth, completely inconsistent with this person's temperament. Su Wenze had an excited expression. His lips trembled as he bowed. Descendant Wenze greets the ancestor of the Su clan. Although he didn't know this person's identity, his aura couldn't be wrong. Saint Wengong's bloodline cultivated a vast and righteous aura that harmonized with the world. This was something that no one could disguise. Rise. The middle-aged scholar's attitude was warm and genial. Your scholarly aura is weak, so you should know that the bloodline of the outside world has already declined. This is as I expected. The cycle of the world has its own rules, and since ancient times, there has never been an evergreen. Su Wenze felt as if he had been filled with wisdom. The resentment that had been buried deep in his heart suddenly dispersed. His mind became clear and his aura shrank. Then it suddenly rose. He broke through his bottleneck, and his cultivation took another step forward. The middle-aged scholar revealed a gratified expression. Your talent is outstanding. If you cultivate well in the future, as long as you uphold the righteousness of the world, you will surely have achievements. Although the Su clan has withered, that doesn't mean it can't rise again from your generation. Su Wenze kowtowed. I thank the ancestor for bestowing this lucky chance upon me, allowing me to break through the demons in my heart. Although the sea of purgatory is dangerous, this great change is also a lucky chance for you. Follow by my side and struggle for the great Tao with fellow Taoists from all over. Yes. Su Wenzi stood up and respectfully stood behind the middle-aged scholar. At this time, the middle-aged scholar gasped, a look of surprise on his face. Ice and fire. This is quite strange. He lifted a hand and grabbed onto Su Wenzi. With a single step, the two of them vanished from sight. Beneath the vault of heaven, a towering mountain towered high. Although it was only a phantom, one could still feel the invisible pressure it emitted. One could see that half of this mountain was covered in ice and snow. An extremely cold aura tumbled about, and snowflakes fluttered in the air. On the other side, waves of heat billowed. Magma flowed between the crimson mountain stones. Within this mountain, there were actually two completely different phenomena. But what was most surprising was that when this extreme cold and extreme heat met, there actually wasn't the slightest bit of conflict. Mellow and harmonious, flowing naturally, this mountain phantom was extremely high, as if it would break through the horizon. But if one looked from afar, they wouldn't be able to sense it at all. It released an invisible potential that disturbed yin and yang and shielded one's aura. Only by reaching a profound level of cultivation and touching upon the essence of the world would one be able to sense anything wrong from the feedback of the world. Then, a door was opened, and they entered this seemingly ordinary world that was actually isolated from the outside world. Now, beneath the towering mountain phantom stood a person. To be more precise, it wasn't appropriate to call him a person. This was because his tall and sturdy body was wrapped in a thick death energy. His pale face didn't have the slightest bit of blood. This was a corpse that had died countless years ago. But now, his appearance was no different from that of an ordinary person. His eyes were filled with dignity and dignity. If Qin Yu and Xin Yuanin were here, they would definitely recognize that this robed figure with an aura that seemed to support the heavens and earth was the rotten corpse that had chased them before. But now, he no longer had his previous distressed appearance. His rotten body had been restored, and his aura had become even more unfathomable. Looking at the mountain phantom where ice and magma coexisted, the rotten corpse's eyes were deep. He could feel a familiar and exciting aura coming from it. Suddenly, the rotten corpse furrowed his eyebrows. He turned and looked to the side. Space quietly separated, and a middle-aged scholar walked out. Behind him was Su Wenzi. Being shrouded by the rotten corpse's gaze, Su Wenzi stiffened. His face paled and sweat dripped down his body. The middle-aged scholar stepped forwards, blocking all the oppressive aura. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Su Xian greets Mr. Dark Parasol. Dark Parasol. The rotten corpse's eyes turned. You recognize me? Su Xian lightly said. When I first came here, I was fortunate enough to see Mr. once. Even after tens of millions of years, Mr.'s elegance is still the same. The rotten corpse seemed to fall in a deep thought. After a long time, he shook his head. I don't remember. He looked away, no longer speaking. Su Xian faintly smiled. He brought Su Wenzi several steps away. Then, he looked up at the mountain phantom, a look of praise in his eyes. But these two juniors were actually able to cause such a stir. One could imagine how extraordinary they were. Every generation had a proud son of heaven. Even if these people had long since vanished from the eyes of the world, the outside world was still a wonderful place. It really made one yearn for it. The third person to arrive was a person completely shrouded in a tattered black robe. Although he was a person, he didn't seem to have a body. Rather, there was only a mass of pitch-black fog that floated in the air. Two dark red motes of light fell on his head. These were his eyes. Behind him followed another person. This person had a handsome and delicate appearance, his red lips revealing a wild and untamed expression. But at this time, he lowered his head, not daring to be insolent. As long as one had the qualifications to open a channel here, each one was a transcendent existence in the world. Killing him would be easy. But soon, this handsome young man's complexion darkened. He stared at the mountain phantom. Although his cultivation was lacking, because of his background, he was extremely sensitive to auras. It was that person, The young man clenched his teeth, his eyes filled with hatred. If it weren't for him interfering, his body would have already been fully formed. Although he might not have been able to do so, it wasn't difficult for him to protect himself against these undying monsters. If he planned carefully, he might have been able to obtain a share of this great good fortune. But now, his congenital deficiency had caused his strength to be unstable. He had been captured by this old ghost and could only submit to him. This handsome young man was the human form of the hellish evil spirit that had escaped that day. Now that he met his mortal enemy, his eyes reddened with hatred. "Arkith, you seem to recognize the two little fellows in the mountain phantom." A deep voice echoed out from the black robes. Dark red motes of light fell onto his body. In the language of the fiends, the name of the hellish evil spirit was Arkith. He fell to one knee and respectfully said, "Reporting to you, my respected master. One of the people in the mountain phantom has caused me to fall into my current state. If master can hand him over to me, Arkith is willing to contribute his own talent to help master struggle for the great Tao." A strange cackle echoed out from the black robes. "Arkith, you cunning fellow, the underground furnace is about to open. If I waste my strength here, I fear I won't be able to restrict you." Although he was cackling, the air suddenly became thick and viscous, as if it would freeze in the next moment. The hellish evil spirit revealed a panic-stricken expression. A lowly servant would never dare to plot against the great ruler. "There is no need for you to worry too much." The following words were transmitted into the black robe's ears through sound transmission. It was unknown what the hellish evil spirit said, but the terrifying aura around the black robes began to slowly fade away. Two dark red eyes fell on the mountain phantom, as if he were considering something. The decayed corpse suddenly said, "They are mine." Calm and steady, every syllable of his words conveyed a formidable confidence. The black robes turned around. He said in a low voice, "Dark Parasol, do you want to be my enemy?" The decayed corpse had no expression. "They are mine." Repetition meant that there was no doubt about it. The black robes fell silent for a long time. Then, with a cold humph, he led the hellish evil spirit away. Retreat didn't mean fear. Rather, it was because the furnace was about to open. That was the good fortune that he had been waiting for countless years. Breaking through the mountain phantom wouldn't consume too much strength, but if he were to fight the decayed corpse, the consequences would be unimaginable. The black robes knew that the decayed corpse was a man of his word, and that he would never back down. He didn't want to take the risk of losing the greater good because of small gain, so he could only choose to give up. But an ominous light surged in his crimson eyes. The fusion of ice and fire was so perfect. It had reached the source level and was protected by the heavens and earth. With their strength, it wouldn't be difficult to break through it. But what they were more worried about was the backlash from the world. It had to be known that these people should have died to begin with. Although they were still alive, they had found a loophole in the rules. Once they were discovered by the world's will, no one could guarantee what the consequences would be. If the decayed corpse wasn't too damaged, then the overall situation would be the most important. But if there was a chance, humph humph. The black robes didn't mind seizing his mortal body. He had long coveted this body that had rotted away over the years. Mist rose into the air. Chinyu slowly opened his eyes. His aura revolved, and he was startled. His injuries had completely recovered. It wasn't just his mortal body, but also his soul that had suffered a backlash from his godhood. What was going on? He looked up and saw a graceful figure reflected in his eyes. His heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened. It was only when those indifferent eyes opened that he regained his composure. He awkwardly coughed and lowered his head. But within his chest, his heart was still beating vigorously, releasing a trace of lingering fear. In his mind, he constantly replayed the tempting scene he saw just now. A warm current howled through his body. Chinyu quickly restrained his thoughts. Luckily, he hadn't lost face, but his face became increasingly stiff. "Thank you." Shen Yuanin's tone was as cold as before. Chinyu waved his hand. "There's no need." he subconsciously said. Then he blinked. In truth, I don't know what happened. His injuries had completely healed. He looked at Shen Yuanyin and saw that her face had regained some color. It was clear she was fine. Shen Yuanyin's eyes were faint. You saved me. I will definitely repay this favor in the future. In the end, his heart was strong. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu composed himself. Seeing that she wasn't willing to speak further, he nodded. All right, if a favor was delivered to his doorstep, he wouldn't refuse it. Moreover, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that Qin Yu had saved her. Shen Yuanyin stood up. Since you've woken up, restrain your aura and remove the barrier. Qin Yu discovered that boundless hot and cold auras were fusing together with the two of them at the center, forming a barrier that was half white and half red. As he sensed it, he was secretly startled. The might of this barrier surpassed his imagination. Although he and Shen Yuanyin weren't weak, there was still a considerable disparity between them. There was clearly a problem here. Perhaps Shen Yuanyin's unwillingness to speak before was related to this. Qin Yu's thoughts raced, and he soon gave up on thinking about it. Even if this barrier was astonishingly strong, he wouldn't be able to create it by himself. If so, then he didn't need to care too much about it. He thought about something else and furrowed his eyebrows. You still haven't prepared to leave? The current sea of purgatory truly deserved its reputation. Even a calamity, immortal realm, supreme elder had to tremble in fear here. If you didn't leave, did you want to stay here and die? Shen Yuanyin remained expressionless. It has nothing to do with you. Looking at her indifferent expression, Qin Yu felt anger surge out from his chest. It has nothing to do with me? I saved you just to watch on helplessly as you send yourself to your death? Bullshit. Don't forget, you still owe me a life-saving graciousness. If you die, who will repay me? Do you think I am the type of person that does good things without asking for anything in return? I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I am not. His words were cold and aggressive, leaving no room for negotiation. But there was a bit more warmth in Shen Yuanyin's eyes. She was silent for a long time. Then, she lightly said, I need something from the sea of purgatory. Otherwise, even if I leave, all that awaits me is death. Qin Yu frowned. He stared at her, not saying a word. Shen Yuanyin lifted a hand, and an icy cold aura spread out. She released her self-sealing barrier, allowing Qin Yu to feel her true situation. Her aura was unstable, and there were signs of her foundation collapsing. What this woman said was true. Qin Yu's lips moved. There is no other choice. Shen Yuanyin lowered her head and restrained her aura. If there is, then I won't keep you. She looked up again, her expression calm without a single ripple. I owe you a favor. If I die, then I can only owe you. Qin Yu's heart surged. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't suppress it. He was also puzzled. He wasn't a good person, so when did he become so concerned about the matters of others? Whether this woman lived or died, was it important to him? After several breaths of silence, Qin Yu nodded. I won't stop you, but I ask you to wait here for a moment. I will leave the sea of purgatory. After I leave, the barrier will disperse. Shen Yuanyin nodded. All right. Qin Yu flicked his sleeves, and 9 four-legged furnaces appeared on the ground. Each one was pitch black, and the phantom of a giant demon appeared on their surface, each one rearing its head back and roaring into the heavens. As the saint son of the holy palace, safety was his #1 priority. Naturally, he had made ample preparations. These 9 giant demon black furnaces were left behind for Qin Yu to use in a desperate situation. With his blood essence, he galvanized the strength of the 9 furnaces and resonated with the 9 mysterious demon phantoms in the demonic path Holy Land's small world, borrowing their strength to forcefully break through space. Breaking through Ing City's Great Array formation was far too difficult, but tearing open a gap and allowing Qin Yu to escape was still possible. With a flick of his sleeves, the 9 furnaces lined up in order. Qin Yu bit down on his fingertip, and his feet moved like the wind. His fingers fell down one after another, each one leaving a dark red mark on the black furnace. 9 furnaces open. With a loud shout, The blood-red finger marks on the 9 furnaces rapidly dispersed. They were like beads of blood that fell into water, spreading out in all directions. Faint traces of blood marks covered the top and bottom of the 9 furnaces. They violently trembled, and the tops of the furnaces exploded. Blood-red light shot out from within. Bang! Space violently trembled. Layers upon layers of fluctuations appeared, and in the next moment it collapsed inward. But the space within the sea of purgatory was different from the outside world. After one layer collapsed, there was another. It was like 2 overlapping worlds. The first layer was easy to break through, but the second layer was exceptionally difficult. This was because this second layer was supported by Ing City's Great Array formation. Even if a calamity immortal were to attack, it would still be difficult to shake it in the slightest. Hum. Violent shaking fluctuations spread outwards. Outside the mountains of ice and magma, Su Xian's eyes flashed. He quietly grabbed onto Su Wenze and flew backwards. Beneath the black robes, dark red eyes swept over him, and he sneered again and again. Dark parasol, if you don't do anything, then that little thing inside will run away. The hellish, evil spirit clenched his fists, a nervous look in his eyes. He didn't want Qin Yu to escape. Otherwise, unless the world underwent a massive change, he would never have a chance to take revenge. The decayed corpse frowned for a moment before composing himself. After restoring his original appearance, he looked even more dignified and dignified. His eyebrows changed slightly, causing the surrounding space to quiet down a bit, as if it had been suppressed. He lifted a hand and pressed forwards. Since he said that the 2 little fellows inside were his, then it had to be so. No one could change this. The black-robed figure couldn't, and neither could they. Outside the mountains, an invisible cage appeared. This was the protection of the world so that it wouldn't be damaged. It was originally hidden, but now that the decayed corpse attacked, it had been activated. But what happened next left everyone shocked. This was because even if it was the protection of the world, with a casual press of his hand, it still collapsed. The decayed corpse's strength surpassed their imaginations. Rumble. There was a loud explosion as if the heavens were falling and the earth was cracking apart. Terrifying cracks appeared, like a great maw that was mercilessly mocking the world. The world had its own spirit and would naturally punish it. In the skies above the decayed corpse, the color of blood suddenly appeared in the gray skies, rapidly spreading outwards. In a breath of time, all one could see was crimson red, as if it were soaked in endless blood. As one looked up, it was like they could see trillions of corpses. If the world was enraged, trillions of corpses would fall and blood would flow for millions of miles. The decayed corpse was expressionless. He didn't even glance at the changes occurring above his head. He lifted a hand and ruthlessly slammed down another palm. The originally collapsing world protection completely disintegrated. Bang! A blood-red bolt of thunder fell from the skies. The moment it fell, the skies were restored to normal. This wasn't a strong start, but a weak finish. Rather, this blood-red thunder had absorbed all of its strength. Gathering all of its strength into a single strike, it was a sure kill. The black-robed figure cried out and hurriedly retreated with the hellish, evil spirit. In his current state of life, he feared the world tribulation even more. But his dark red eyes were filled with excitement. Although he expected that attacking the mountains would cause a backlash from the world, he didn't expect it to reach such a degree. No matter how strong the decayed corpse was, it was no longer the same as when it was alive. Moreover, the world tribulation had an additional terrifying killing power to it. Even if it didn't die, it would surely be severely wounded. At that time, the black-robed figure's chance would arrive. If it could smoothly seize the body, its strength would inevitably rise. At that time, who would be able to compete with it for the great good fortune within the underground furnace? This was simply wondrous to the extreme. But the black-robed figure's excitement only lasted for a short period of time. When the blood-red thunder was about to strike the decayed corpse, a mass of fire suddenly appeared. Although it was called a flame, in truth it wasn't appropriate. This was because it was only a mass of pure and absolute strength. It was just that its form was similar to a flame. Facing the blood-red thunder, this flame split apart from the middle, as if it had opened its mouth and swallowed a whole. Then, there was no then. The flame vanished from sight. Just as it had appeared, it was extremely quiet. The black-robed figure froze. His dark red eyes glared at the corpse. After a long time, he spat out a deep breath. Bastard! The decayed corpse had taken advantage of a loophole. No wonder he was so calm and unworried. Thinking about it, the world furnace was about to open, so how could it allow the outside world to be insolent in front of it? The decayed corpse remained expressionless. It was clear everything was within his expectations. His descending palm continued to grasp downwards. The world protection had already collapsed. Even if the fusion of ice and fire was incomparably firm, it wasn't anything in front of him. Kacha! Kacha! Cracks instantly appeared on the mountain phantom. They spread out at an astonishing speed, covering every inch and corner. Cracks appeared on the 9 furnaces. Strength erupted to the limit. Suddenly, a strange aura gushed out from the shattered space. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. He knew that a gap had been torn open in Ink Capital's Great Array formation. He hesitated for a moment, but this was immediately suppressed. Xin Yuanin had already made her choice. No matter what the result was, she would be the one to bear it. With a step forwards, Qin Yu stepped into the shattered space. He was about to leave the sea of purgatory. Bang! The barrier around him shook, and countless cracks appeared. A cold and callous voice pierced straight into his heart. Chapter 581. Deep underground, many boiling rivers gathered from all directions. Their entire bodies were crimson like lava, and each of them contained an extremely terrifying aura. This was because these things that looked like underground rivers were in essence spirit veins buried deep within the earth. Wherever spirit veins passed through the world, they were all heavenly paradises. Naturally, they gathered heaven and earth's spiritual strength and were greatly beneficial to one's cultivation. But even the peak cultivation Holy Land had never seen such an astonishing sight before. As far as the eye could see, there were at least several hundred spirit veins, and none of them were weak. Each and every one of them was like a coiling dragon, releasing their powerful auras to their heart's content. And what was even more shocking was that these spirit veins buried deep underground had gathered together. It was like a sun was hanging underground. The decayed corpse held his hands behind his back. He stood atop the mountain peak, calmly looking at the great sun below. There was no joy or sorrow on his face. It was just that there was a bit of confusion in his eyes. He didn't know why he hadn't killed those 2 little fellows after capturing them. His mind was in turmoil, as if he had forgotten something that was extremely important to him. It seemed that a long, long time ago, there was also a woman like that by his side. He was willing to live for her, willing to die for her, willing to disregard everything for her. But why had he forgotten her? What sort of person was she? The decayed corpse's eyes became increasingly blank. He subconsciously clenched his fists. At the mountain peak, space instantly froze. A stuffy cough sounded out from behind him, startling him awake. He frowned and slowly restrained his aura. He looked up at the great sun, hanging underground. A firm light flashed in his eyes. If he obtained a great stroke of good fortune, reversing yin and yang, life and death would only take a single thought. Perhaps at that time, he would know everything and remember who he had forgotten, just who it was. The decayed corpse turned and left. Xin Yuanin looked up. She looked in the direction he left, and then at Qin Yu. She lightly said, "Why didn't you leave?" Qin Yu shook his head. "I wasn't sure." To tear open a crack in Ink Capital's Great Array was already extremely difficult. If it were struck by an external force, it was likely it would collapse. This reason was ample, and it was indeed so, but was there really no other reason? Shun Yunin's expression was still faint, but between her eyebrows, there was a bit more inexplicably complex. She seriously looked at him and didn't say anything else. She turned and walked towards her cave. Qin Yu revealed a helpless smile. He secretly mocked himself in his heart, because he discovered that even now, he didn't feel the slightest bit of regret. If this wasn't obsession, then what was? He took a deep breath and suppressed his restless mood. His face was firm. Perhaps a catastrophe would soon befall them, but since they weren't dead yet, they had to live on, putting oneself on the brink of death and coming back to life. The affairs of the world were always unpredictable. Perhaps there would be a turn for the better, but no one knew. Underground, where the great sun was located, was a huge valley. Due to the shockingly high temperature, the mud and stones had long since melted into magma, rolling about like a pool of red soup. Mountains stood in great numbers in the surroundings. Every single one of them reached the heavens, towering and majestic. Apart from the innermost ring, which was shrouded in scarlet light and had a half-melted surface, anything that was closer to it was shrouded in a terrifying aura. Although their auras were restrained and they didn't clash, this invisible confrontation nearly caused the world to freeze. No wonder the rotten corpse didn't leave behind any words when it left. It was likely that it knew that Qin Yu, Shun Yuanin, and the others wouldn't flee. In such a situation, if they left the mountain beneath them, they would likely die even faster. In a cave, Qin Yu sat down cross-legged. He wasn't cultivating, but was constantly visualizing in his mind. The spirit veins gathered into a great sun, brilliant and incomparably dignified. The energy here surged like raging waves. The inheritance he obtained from the Holy Palace was the visualization demon body art. It gathered the strength of the world and condensed the body of an ancient demon. This was because this art required an extremely high level of the world's strength. If it wasn't enough, its might would be greatly reduced. It was because of this that Qin Yu thought it was mediocre and that it would only have some benefits in promoting the cultivation of the demon body. But in the current environment, every time he took a deep breath, his chest would be filled with thick spiritual strength. If he could condense the body of an ancient demon, his strength would surely rise. Even if he condensed the body of an ancient demon, in front of the rotten corpse and those who occupied the surrounding mountain peaks, he still wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow. But when Qin Yu was humble, he had a tenacious heart that refused to give up. If he made some preparations, then perhaps he could preserve his life in a life or death situation. Even if he died in the end, it would only be a waste of time. Thus, Qin Yu diligently visualized, causing the phantom of the ancient demon to become increasingly solid. Once he needed it, he could immediately use supernatural powers to condense the body of an ancient demon. In his mind, the towering ancient demon ran forwards. It was over 10,000 feet tall, and every step it took caused the mountains and rivers to tremble. On its head, two horns gradually condensed, pointing towards the heavens. A wild and unyielding momentum appeared, as if even the heavens couldn't force it to bow its head. Within Qin Yu's chest, his heartbeat accelerated, causing all the blood in his body to rumble and roar. Like a vast and mighty river, the ancient demon ran faster and faster, its figure like a bolt of lightning. Within the world of his mind, its aura became increasingly strong, but it always felt like it was lacking some foundation. It was empty. The stronger it appeared, the weaker it was inside. This intense contrast between inside and outside caused Qin Yu's chest to feel heavy and his breathing to become hurried. Suddenly, the world of his mind violently trembled. It was like a great bell had been struck. The world violently twisted. Mountains and rivers, the skies began to rapidly collapse. The ancient demon stopped, disregarding the collapsing world around him. A faint look of joy appeared in his eyes. A formidable aura spread out from the collapsing world. It was their impact that caused the collapse of the world of his mind. Overbearing, dignified, valiant, cruel, unexcelled in the world. Absolute strength. It could not be provoked. It could not be resisted. It was this aura. At this moment, Qin Yu was enlightened. He finally understood what the ancient demon was missing. What was missing was an indomitable momentum that could break through all. The ancient demon was born to support the heavens and earth. It would never bow its head in defeat, never fall in death. It could fight the heavens. It could fight the earth. Opening its mouth, the ancient demon reared its head back and roared. Within the world of his mind, a tyrannical aura rushed into its body like 100 rivers returning to the sea. With a quiver, Qin Yu's eyes popped open. His face paled. His mind had been damaged, and he had suffered a bit of backlash. But the terrifying aura outside left him in no mood to think about anything else. Light flashed, and he flew out of the cave. He looked up. The underground world had collapsed. A 10,000-foot long-boned dragon howled in pain as it tumbled backwards. Wherever it went, everything was broken. The wild strength left one's mind shaking. This bone dragon's bones were pure black like jade, and their surface shined with a brilliant light. The flames in its eye sockets were a brilliant deep purple. Its terrifying aura was no less than that of a rotten corpse. But now, its ribs had been broken and a horn had been snapped off its head. It was in an extremely distressed state, as frightened as a stray dog. Qin Yu's eyes widened. He found it hard to imagine just what sort of existence could force this terrifying ancient dragon to such a degree. Suddenly, his heart shrank, as if it were being grasped by a giant invisible hand. 3 figures walked out from the shattered space. But right now, all of Qin Yu's attention was focused on the person in front. He was like the center of the heavens and earth. Naturally, he could draw in all attention and make others feel awe. Qin Yu froze. A numb feeling erupted from the top of his head and swept through his entire body. His soul froze, and his thoughts sank into a swamp. It was nearly impossible to think, and his mind went completely blank. Even when he was at Four Seasons City and had personally fought a calamity immortal, Qin Yu hadn't felt this way. It was like this person in front of him was the incarnation of the heavens and earth. With just a thought, he could control life and death. Within his soul space, the purple moon suddenly lit up, sprinkling down dazzling moonlight. The deep purple light revealed a dignified expression as if it were facing a great enemy. The cosmic sea cross bell rang out. A short and urgent sound echoed through the air, releasing strange fluctuations that counteracted the terrifying pressure. Qin Yu seemed to come back to life. He gasped for breath, beads of sweat covering his forehead and soaking his robes. He lowered his head, not daring to look. There was only one thought in his mind. Who was this person? Who was he? Emperor Zhou. The first voice sounded out. It came from the 3rd mountain peak on the right. It was deep and low, as if every syllable contained the weight of a mountain. Although it was calm, everyone could feel a sense of unease and dread from this voice. It really is him. He hasn't decayed yet. How is this possible? Loud shouts rang out one after another. Terrifying auras appeared, shooting into the heavens. This wasn't a show of strength, but an instinctive display of strength in the face of a natural enemy. Qin Yu's eyes revealed a blank look. In a land of divinity and demons, where did this Emperor Zhou come from? Could it be that this was an exclusive title? He swept his eyes over Shun Yuanin. Her complexion was pale. It was clear she had been suppressed just now. Her eyes were wide open. This was the first time Qin Yu had seen clear fluctuations of emotion from Shun Yuanin. It was clear she knew of Emperor Zhou's origins. Who is Emperor Zhou? Shun Yuanin was silent for several breaths of time as she heard Qin Yu's words. Then she replied, before the 7 empires, there was only a single dynasty in the world. Its name was Zhou. Qin Yu's heart shook. The 7 empires of the world were divided into endless territories, and their strength was unfathomably deep. In the land of divinity and demons, they were existences that were second only to the immortal and demonic paths. But they were actually formed by splitting apart the great Zhou. Then just how powerful was the Zhou Empire of the past? Just thinking about it left his mind shaking. Perhaps, in front of the Zhou Empire, the immortal and demonic paths could only be rolled over. If one were to delve deeper into the matter, for a group of old monsters to be able to see through his identity with just a single glance, and for them to be so shocked, fearful, and even fearful of him, he was definitely not an ordinary monarch. Could it be that he was the founding monarch of a nation? Just a single person facing so many terrifying existences was calm and composed, his every movement suppressing the world. Such momentum, such majesty. Indeed, only a great emperor that founded a country and ruled over the entire mysterious land could possess such an ability. Qin Yu's guess wasn't wrong. At this time, the ones that arrived were the Chu Empire's founding great emperor, Zhang Lingtian and Lin Weiwei. Emperor Zhou's eyes were icy cold. He looked at the bone dragon. "I want you to die." The deep purple flames in the bone dragon's eye sockets violently trembled, emitting an intense feeling of fear. "Everyone, Emperor Zhou has arrived here to seize the great good fortune. If you and I do not join forces, who can contend with him?" This was the truth. In the underground world, the atmosphere suddenly changed. Whether they wanted to believe it or not, the truth was right in front of them. Emperor Zhou had arrived. Chapter 582. In the underground world, terrifying auras wove together. It was like a bottomless abyss that could swallow a trillion lives. Emperor Zhou's complexion was cold, as if he had been chiseled by a saber. His eyes were as deep as a sea of stars. His voice was low and deep, carrying with it an endless pressure. Every word he spoke was like a thunderclap. "Do you all want to stop me?" There was a sudden, deathly silence. At this moment, even the super powerhouses that reached the very essence of the world and stood at the limits of the world felt their hearts tremble. The long silence demonstrated the unsurpassed dignity of this great emperor. No one dared to offend him, because even they weren't willing to withstand the consequences. But in the end, someone had to stand up. Everyone had evaded the rules of the world and struggled to this day, all for the sake of this only hope. How could they bow their hands and retreat like this, even if the one they faced was the terrifying Emperor Zhou? The decayed corpse looked up. This simple movement caused his bones to crackle and the ground beneath his feet to instantly turn to powder. But his expression remained calm, and his eyes remained calm. "Your Majesty Emperor Zhou, your words carry enormous weight. I wonder if your arrival today is truly, as the bone dragon says." Emperor Zhou had a faint expression. Yes, his status and his pride didn't allow him to deny it. Moreover, even if he did say it, so what? Although there were many powerhouses here, when he roamed the land of divinity and demons in the past, he had experienced far more astonishing scenes than this. There was no fear at all. The decayed corpse cupped his hands together. "I thank your Majesty Emperor Zhou for speaking the truth." He straightened his body, pointing a spear towards the heavens. "I know that I am no match for your Majesty's invincible might, so I can only shamelessly join forces with you to struggle with your Majesty." Bang! He took a step forward. His robes fluttered in the wind as he locked onto Emperor Zhou from afar. "Mr. Tsang Wu is right. Your Majesty's status is too noble, so we can only offend you." Su Xian slowly spoke. The phantom of a great scholar appeared around him. His chanting filled the air, and a vast and noble aura pierced through the skies. Bang! A second lock. "Your Majesty Emperor Zhou, although this is not what we want, we cannot retreat today." Bang! A third lock. Then a fourth, a fifth, a sixth. In terms of individual strength, Emperor Zhou was more than enough to roll over everyone here. However, they were, after all, people who had reached the apex of their respective eras. Every single one of them possessed heaven-shaking strength. Now that they were working together, their auras were gathered in one place. Although they were far from being able to fuse their auras together, just the overlaying of their auras was already terrifying enough. Zhang Lingtian clenched his fists, worry in his eyes. Even though the records of the sovereign race stated that the founding emperor possessed an invincible might that could pierce through the heavens and earth, that was still something that was said when he was alive. Now that he had been asleep for tens of millions of years, no one knew just how much strength the newly awakened Emperor Zhou had left. One against many. Moreover, they were a group of old monsters who would never back down. If things got out of hand and they were forced to resist desperately, who knew what would happen in the end? Emperor Zhou turned and glanced at him. Although he didn't say anything, his gaze seemed to pierce straight into his heart. Zhang Lingtan hurriedly lowered his head, feeling anxious and fearful. Emperor Zhou's eyes flickered with coldness and self-mockery. If it was back then, who in this world would dare to threaten him? After all, time and tide wait for no man. After several breaths of silence, Emperor Zhou suddenly said, "No one can stop me from doing what I want to do." The bone dragon's soul fires began to wildly tumble about. It screamed in pain and wanted to escape, but in a short breath of time, the purple soul fires had quietly extinguished. Bang! The bone dragon's massive body crashed into the ground. In the blink of an eye, it was swallowed up by the spirit veins and pulled into the pool. An unfathomably strong bone dragon that had lived for countless years had been quietly killed in front of everyone in the blink of an eye. And what was even more shocking was that from start to finish, they hadn't been able to sense anything wrong at all. This meant that the strength Emperor Zhou possessed far surpassed their imaginations. Or, to be more precise, he had touched upon an even higher level. Could they really contend with the incomparably terrifying Emperor Zhou? How terrifying! Undying's voice sounded out in Qin Yu's mind, his voice dignified. This Emperor Zhou, even in his era, was an incomparably dazzling existence. Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. Undying, can you sense Emperor Zhou's depths? I can't. He paused for a moment and continued to say, but Master does not need to think too much about this. Emperor Zhou is indeed strong, but he might not be as invincible as he seems. If he could casually kill an existence on the level of a bone dragon, why would he waste his time? He could just kill everyone here, and this great good fortune would naturally be his. Qin Yu suddenly understood Undying's meaning. Deterrence? It's hard to say, but without accident, Emperor Zhou should compromise. As if to prove his words, Emperor Zhou's callous voice echoed out. Today, I can kill all of you, but I will have to pay a great price to do so. This is not what I want. Since you are willing to fight to the death, I will give you a chance. He lifted a hand and grasped towards the great sun beneath him. Billowing gray energy gushed out, gathering into a mass. On the surface of this mass of energy, countless lines appeared, constantly tumbling and changing. These lines gave Qin Yu an extremely familiar feeling. They were the power of the rules. I will use the infernal energy of the earth to form an illusory world. You and I will each send one person in. The one who survives to the end will obtain the great good fortune. To casually create a world, even if it was an illusory world that couldn't exist for long, it was still amazing enough. The decayed corpse said, "Good. We will do as your majesty says." Yes, Emperor Zhou's words are as precious as jade. No one objected, because they knew that with Emperor Zhou's status, it was impossible for him to keep retreating. Moreover, in their eyes, the two people behind Emperor Zhou weren't dazzling at all. Perhaps this was a better choice. The black-robed figure turned and whispered something. The eyes of the hellish evil spirit flashed with a fanatical light. He looked at Qin Yu and licked the corners of his lips. His tongue was bright red. Su Wenze clenched his teeth. He bowed and said, "This disciple is willing to fight for ancestor." Su Xian frowned. He sighed and said, "I originally wanted to give you some lucky chances, but the affairs of the world are fickle. You will have to bear the risk first. But you can rest assured that in a life or death situation, just crush this key and you will be able to escape." He lifted a hand. Gray energy condensed between his fingers, forming a pale white key. The decayed corpse turned, his eyes ice cold. Before he could speak, Shen Yuan said, "Allow me." "Kacha! Kacha!" The ground beneath his feet instantly froze, and ice and snow fluttered around him. The decayed corpse shook his head. "The exalted oblivion is fierce, but your foundation has been damaged. The more you activate the law formula, the faster you will die. Although I don't care, I can't allow you to ruin my great plans." He looked at Qinyu. "You go. If you can seize this great good fortune for me, I will forgive you. Otherwise, when you die, I will send her along with you so you can reunite in the Yellow Springs." Qinyu nodded. "All right." In this matter, he didn't have a choice to begin with. Shen Yuan wanted to say something, but the decayed corpse didn't give her the chance. He lifted a hand and pointed a finger between her eyebrows. His movements weren't fast, but for some unknown reason, Shen Yuan wasn't able to dodge. As the finger fell, her body froze and all of her aura was sealed away. Chapter 583. On a long snakestone tablet, the skeleton placed a hand on his chest and bowed respectfully. "This lowly person greets His Majesty the Emperor." Emperor Zhou stood with his hands behind his back. His calm face contained supreme dignity. When his eyes opened and closed, it caused the clouds in the sky to change. Tens of millions of years have passed, yet your race has yet to be annihilated. Now that you've appeared before me, are you seeking death? Sinner. The deep voice rumbled like thunder, reverberating in the air and resounding in all directions. The skeleton straightened its body, black flames surging in its eye sockets. "Your Majesty's pressure is unrivaled. If you wanted to kill me, it would only take a flip of your hand. But the current land of divinity and demons is no longer the great Zhou Empire. The 7 empires are divided. I'm afraid they won't just watch as His Majesty rules the world again." "Are you warning me?" "A lowly person wouldn't dare to offend Your Majesty. But now that I'm alive, perhaps it would be more beneficial for Your Majesty. Because my clan and His Majesty now have a common need, which is to plunge the world into chaos. His Majesty can take the opportunity to restore the great Zhou dynasty, and my clan can also return to our homeland, avoiding the calamity of extinction." Emperor Zhou's eyes suddenly brightened like a vast nebula. "The cold wave of the north has arrived?" The skeleton nodded yes. He understood the reason why the founding emperor was concerned about this matter. With his esteemed status, he should have been able to enjoy supreme glory and rule over the world for countless years. However, he was willing to abandon everything and willingly sink his consciousness into eternal darkness. Wasn't it all for this one and only chance in billions of years? Emperor Zhou revealed a smile. After several breaths of silence, he slowly said, "Since you brought me this news, I will give you a chance to forgive yourselves." The skeleton knelt down. "If my clan can escape from this great calamity, then in the future, life and death, honor and disgrace will all be in Your Majesty's hands." Emperor Zhou turned. "Remember your promise to me. There will only be one chance." With a single step, the figure dissipated with the wind, revealing itself to be an incarnation. On the long snake steel, the skeleton stood up. Black flames surged in its eye sockets. It was unknown whether it should be happy or sad. The Zhou dynasty unified the world and expelled the sinners into the northern border's cold region. For tens of millions of years, the number of people who died or were injured because of this was uncountable. But now, he had made a choice for his race and had become Emperor Zhou's disciple. Would the surviving clansmen understand his difficulties? Would his dead clansmen forgive him for his choice? After a long time, he let out a soft sigh, concealing all the difficulties in his heart. "I'll have to spend some effort." The cultivator across from him lightly said, his eyes filled with confidence. When he entered the illusory realm, this person had already noticed Qinyu. His aura was ordinary, and there wasn't anything special about him. When he discovered Qinyu, he was secretly pleasantly surprised, Thus he attacked without hesitation. Schwa. This person's eyes turned a pure silver white, icy cold without the least bit of warmth. Then, a terrifying divine sense impact erupted like a tide. A moment ago, this person had been arrogant and complacent, but in the next moment, he had attacked without any warning. Those that were chosen to be sent into the illusory realm weren't stupid. Even if they were confident, they wouldn't be careless. There was a reason why this cultivator could hide from Qin Yu's senses. His special and formidable soul gave him the strength to roll over his opponents in the soul level. Once his soul was injured, his life or death would naturally be in his control. Qin Yu stuffily coughed, and his complexion paled. The cultivator across from him rushed forwards and slammed his hand down between his eyebrows. Before his hand fell, a terrifying aura had already arrived. He didn't hold back at all, but at this time, a palm rose up and grabbed this person's wrist. In the next moment, a forceful pull was pulled back. The cultivator staggered. Before the shock and panic on his face could disperse, a fist smashed into his chest. Blood wildly gushed out from his nose and mouth, mixed with fragments of his organs. Qin Yu's fist landed without pause. Then came a second punch, a third punch. With a casual toss, the cultivator fell to the ground. His entire body was paralyzed, his flesh and bones turned to mush. He had died. After killing someone with 3 punches, Qin Yu didn't have any expression on his face. He turned and left, vanishing without a trace. Soon, 4 figures arrived. As they looked at the corpse on the ground, dread appeared in their eyes. From the time they sensed the aura to the time they rushed here, an extremely short period of time had passed. But after exchanging blows, the person had actually been killed, and the killer had calmly left. This level of strength left them startled. The 3 of them glanced at each other. Without pausing, they turned and left. No one knew whether or not these fluctuations would draw in more people. Everyone wanted to live to the end, but no one dared to recklessly start a chaotic battle. Outside the hot spring, on a certain mountain peak, there was an angry roar. Then, a cruel and evil aura locked onto them from afar. The decayed corpse remained expressionless. He continued to look up at the situation in the mirage world, not caring about what was happening. The cruel and evil aura hesitated for a long time before slowly dissipating. Although he was angry and filled with resentment, he didn't dare to be too insolent. This was because the one who set the rules was Emperor Zhou. Time slowly passed. The decayed corpse suddenly frowned, a gloomy look appearing in his eyes. Even now, he still hadn't discovered any traces of that boy behind Emperor Zhou. The mirage world wasn't complete, so it wasn't able to block his attention. Although he didn't know what caused this to happen, a foreboding premonition began to grow in his heart. Qin Yu had decisively ended the first battle. This wasn't because he had overwhelming strength, but because his opponent had chosen his strongest defensive soul and exposed his mortal body to his strongest defensive body. Thus, he continued to be extremely cautious. Fortunately, he wasn't ambushed again. Instead, he was able to sense the fluctuations from the battle of others. Of the people who were sent into the illusory world, only one would be able to stay. Although hitting someone while they were down was not honorable, it was also the best opportunity to eliminate one's opponent. Qin Yu was not pedantic, nor did he boast of being a good person. Thus, after thinking for a moment, he quickly followed the direction of the fluctuations. As the saying goes, only a fool would not take advantage of an opportunity. A moment later, Qin Yu restrained his aura. When he saw the 2 sides fighting, he couldn't help but frown. How could it be him? One of them was Su Wenze. Since Qin Yu had recognized Feng Yunyun's favor, he naturally wouldn't forget him. Although Su Wenze had most likely spoken up for him because of Feng Yunyun, he still owed him a favor, so it wouldn't be good for him to attack again. But even if he didn't touch Su Wenze, he might as well make a move against his opponent. A hellish, evil spirit. This fellow had changed his appearance, but his aura couldn't be faked. Moreover, this hellish, evil spirit had repeatedly shown malice towards him just now. Did he really think he didn't know? The 2 of them were locked in battle. If he joined forces with Su Wenze, it wouldn't be difficult to kill them. But How could he make Su Wenzi trust him? As Qin Yu was thinking, his complexion suddenly changed. More people had arrived, and there was more than one. Qin Yu looked up into the distance. Two figures were rapidly approaching. Although they had hidden their tracks as soon as they landed, they still couldn't hide from his eyes. This was troublesome. With two cultivators waiting outside, Qin Yu didn't dare to act rashly. Otherwise, if he wasn't careful, he might be plotted against. The hellish evil spirit paled. He originally thought that this was a soft persimmon, but he never imagined that his hand would grab onto a hard stone. He was already filled with regret. He shouldn't have coveted this person's pure soul aura, but with things having come to this point, what use was regret? The two of them fought for a long time and still hadn't decided victory or defeat. In a place like the illusory world, how could it be hidden from others? As the hellish evil spirit thought that there might already be people staring at him from the shadows, he felt as if there was a blade on his back, and his expression became increasingly gloomy. In particular, Su Wenzi's attacks became increasingly swift and fierce. Overwhelming righteousness soared into the heavens, making the hellish evil spirit feel as if it were being pierced by needles. It was difficult for him to retreat, and if he revealed any signs of weakness, he feared he would be severely wounded. "Brat, since you want to die, I will help you along." The hellish evil spirit was originally extremely noble and had an extraordinary life. But because he was born with a congenital deficiency, his strength was greatly reduced. Even so, he still had his own life-preserving methods, otherwise Black Robe wouldn't have brought him along. Arcus, for him to call out his true name, this was an extremely important meaning to a demonic being. Blood-red flames gushed out from his body, wrapping around the hellish evil spirit. They burned away his fur and flesh, revealing his true body. What appeared in the blood-red flames was a demon covered in scales, with sharp claws on each hand and foot and a tail behind him. Its blood-red eyes glared at Su Wenzi, and it opened its mouth to silently roar. At a certain frequency, it rapidly trembled, producing an incomparably terrifying strength. Su Wenzi took a deep breath. He lifted a hand and pointed between his eyebrows. Endless light erupted, making him seem even more dignified. Within this light, the phantoms of great scholars appeared. They chanted the book of philosophers, and the vast, righteous energy of the world gathered, rejecting all evil spirits in the world. Bang! There was a thunderclap. The surroundings of the phantoms of the great scholars began to tremble and rapidly turn blurry. This was the cursed strength that came from hell. It could kill all life and annihilate all life. Even if it was a departed heroic spirit, it could weaken it until it finally dissipated from the world. Su Wenzi's eyes flashed with hesitation, but it immediately turned into firm determination. He loudly chanted, fusing with the phantoms of the great scholars. He cupped his hands together and deeply bowed. The phantoms of the great scholars disintegrated, turning into countless golden characters. The first sentence of the opening was, "The heavens are vigorous, so must a gentleman ceaselessly strive to improve himself." A grand aura from ancient times arrived. As more and more golden characters appeared, it seemed like the majesty of the heavens and earth, making it impossible for anyone to resist. The hellish evil spirit miserably cried out. Most of the blood-red flames around him were extinguished. He glared at Qin Yu with hatred in his eyes and then turned to flee. But at this time, a change occurred. A giant hand appeared out of thin air and grabbed hold of the escaping hellish evil spirit. "Ah!" The hellish evil spirit roared in anger. But before he could respond, the giant hand suddenly clenched. There was the sound of breaking flesh and bone, causing one's scalp to tingle. The blood-red flames around the hellish evil spirit were instantly extinguished. His body slumped down and blood flowed out from every orifice of his head. With just a single grasp, he had been directly killed. Qin Yu's eyes widened and his heart skipped a beat. Although the hellish evil spirit had fled, he still had the strength to fight. But he had been easily killed like this. The strength of the one who attacked was absolutely at the tribulation immortal level. Moreover, it wasn't the strength of an ordinary tribulation immortal. Qin Yu's scalp tingled. He no longer cared about Suwenza. Just as he was about to quietly leave, he froze. This was because at this moment, a terrifying aura fell down from the heavens, locking onto him from afar. Qin Yu's intuition told him that if he left, he would be greeted by a terrifying attack in the next moment. At this time, the cultivators that were drawn over by the battle between Suwenza and the hellish evil spirit all had the same feeling as Qin Yu. In other words, the master of the heavens aura had locked onto all of them at the same time. How strong! How tyrannical! Everyone raised their heads and looked at the sky above their heads. Gray mist was tumbling there, and then the space was collapsing inwards. A tall figure stepped out, his steps steady and powerful, as if 1,000 mountains and 10,000 rivers could be trampled beneath his feet. His actions were filled with unparalleled might. It was him. Qin Yu's pupils shrank. Behind Emperor Zhou, there was a young man with an invisible aura. What sort of status did Emperor Zhou have? Since he had appeared, how could he leave empty-handed? So from the very start, Qin Yu had dreaded this person, and now, could this be considered confirming his guess? It was just that this person was a bit too strong. The good fortune of the Sea of Purgatory belongs to His Majesty, the great Zhou Emperor. All of you must die. A low and deep voice exuded an unquestionable momentum. The cold killing intent caused everyone's hearts to tremble. Humph! With a sneer, a figure on the ground suddenly exploded into shadows that filled the skies, howling in all directions. In the current situation, since he dared to leave, he naturally had the confidence to do so. Of these shadows that filled the skies, each one was illusory, and each one was their true body. Unless they were all instantly erased, even if only one escaped, they would be able to draw strength from the outside world and rapidly restore themselves. Zhang Lingtian was expressionless. He lifted a hand and pressed downwards. Space violently trembled and then exploded. With a single point as the center, a terrifying strength swept out like a tsunami. Wherever it went, the illusory space collapsed, turning into a horrifying maw. Forgive me. Before he could finish his terrified scream, the shadows that filled the skies were swallowed up. Zhang Lingtian's hand tightened, and the person's aura instantly vanished. To kill the hellish evil spirit with one hand and destroy the shadows that filled the skies with the other, such might and momentum was truly shocking. Run! It was unknown who roared out. Everyone gathered here, whether they were in the open or in the dark, all turned and fled. No matter how strong Zhang Lingtian was, he couldn't chase down everyone at once. It all depended on who was unlucky. It wasn't that they didn't want to resist, but that the strength Zhang Lingtian displayed left them in despair. He was so strong that it wasn't something that could be made up for with numbers alone. At least, with just a few of them here, it was far from enough. Qin Yu forcefully suppressed the impulse in his heart. He didn't immediately move. When there was the sound of breaking air, he stepped forwards. He drew backwards like a bolt of lightning. Just as he moved, that terrifying aura became sharp and swift. But before he moved, he had already made a prediction. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed into the shadows. In the next moment, he vanished from sight. When he reappeared, he was already 10 miles away. But to a tribulation immortal, this distance was nothing more than a moment. It was so short that it could be ignored. So, the moment he appeared, he used Shadow Step once more without hesitation. But his complexion didn't relax at all. This was because that aura that had locked onto him was like a maggot in his bones. He couldn't shake it off. Zhang Lingtian frowned for a moment before composing himself. He took a step forwards, and his figure vanished before reappearing again. A fleeing cultivator's face instantly drained of blood. He cried out loud as his mortal body wildly expanded. But Zhang Lingtian didn't give him the chance to fight to the death. He lifted a hand and pointed a finger. That person's body exploded, turning into broken bones and flesh that filled the skies. After killing a person with a single finger, Zhang Lingtian turned and left. 2 breaths of time later, he killed a second person. His face was expressionless, like a god descending from the heavens. But in his heart, there was a bone-chilling cold. This was because Zhang Lingtian was well aware that the terrifying strength he possessed now wasn't something he truly possessed. Rather, it was an overdrawing of his source. The more glorious he was now, the more miserable he would be in the future. He didn't want to do this, but he had no other choice. The will of the founding emperor could not be questioned, even if there was a high chance he would die because of it. Shua, Zhang Lingtian stopped. He sensed the auras of 2 people and immediately chased after them with his divine sense. Within Shadow Step, his heart skipped a beat. It was like a falling mountain and a great calamity had arrived. He took a deep breath and calmed the tumultuous waves in his heart. In his mind, the ancient demon reared its head back and roared. This was his strongest technique right now. He wouldn't hold anything back. If they wanted to kill him, then come. At almost the same time, Zhang Lingtian frowned, surprise in his eyes. He couldn't help but turn around and look to the left. This person's aura was so strong that even he felt a sense of dread. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Lingtian took a step forwards and chased after the fleeing cultivator. He narrowed his eyes, and the fighting spirit within him surged. Chapter 584. Emperor Zhou. Angry roars sounded out one after another. Icy cold eyes gathered from all directions. Outside the hot spring, space froze over and all fluctuations were suppressed. Emperor Zhou was expressionless. I have not broken the rules, so you had best abide by your previous promises. After a brief pause, his voice darkened. Otherwise, everyone here will become my enemy, and I will not rest until I die. If you don't keep your promises, I might retreat today, but in the future, I will wait for you all. No one will be able to escape. This was a naked and undisguised threat. With Emperor Zhou's status, saying such words was a loss of face. But from another perspective, the dignified Emperor Zhou didn't even care about his face. So who would dare to not take his words to heart? The enraged people all paled. Their minds shivered and a deep fear rose up within them. With Emperor Zhou's status, he would definitely do what he said. No one wanted to truly provoke him. They clenched their teeth, and their complexions became increasingly ugly. But they could only suppress this in their hearts and curse their own miscalculations. Who would have thought that Emperor Zhou would do something like this? Looking at the people fleeing in all directions in the phantom world, they couldn't help but grit their teeth. What a bunch of idiots. That boy had already given up his source energy, and his strength had risen dramatically in a short period of time. If they continued to flee like headless flies, they would all be killed sooner or later. Join forces. With so many people attacking together, they might be able to survive. As long as their source energy dried up, that boy would die. The more they ran, the greater the fear in their hearts became. This was because they discovered that they seemed to have fallen into a giant spider web. In this web, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't escape. That terrifying evil star behind them could easily lock onto them. Every once in a while, terrifying fluctuations of strength would erupt. Then, an aura would rapidly vanish from sight. This meant that another cultivator in the phantom world had been killed on the spot. We cannot continue like this, otherwise we will all die sooner or later. As this thought appeared in their minds, the pale-faced and panic-stricken people all revealed fierce expressions. Since they couldn't escape, they would fight him to the death. If one person wasn't his match, then they would all attack together. Stop running. Let's fight him to the death. Fight him to the death. Let's join forces and kill him. Angry roars exploded everywhere, like thunderclaps. Shwa, shwa. In the illusory realm, cultivators appeared one after another and headed straight for one place. Zhang Lingtian's terror caused them to feel fear. If they couldn't kill him, they could only be killed by him. No one thought themselves clever and chose to hide in the dark, because that would only lead to them being killed first. One person, two people, three people. More and more cultivators appeared, each of them as if they were facing a great enemy, the aura around them erupting crazily. Space had long since collapsed, forming black vortexes one after another. But now, everyone's auras were connected, turning into invisible mountains that suppressed everything. The destructive power produced by the collapse of space could not even get close to it before it was directly crushed. Without a doubt, this gave the crowd some confidence. Their pale faces gradually calmed down. Even a collapsing world would not be able to shake them in the slightest, much less a mere Zhang Ling Tian. No matter how strong he was, could he be stronger than the heavens and earth? If he dared to come, they would attack together and kill him on the spot. Time passed breath by breath. Zhang Ling Tian's aura vanished without a trace. He didn't attack again. As if facing the joint attack of so many people, he also felt that it was difficult to deal with him. This knowledge emerged from the bottom of their hearts. Everyone's chest was instantly filled with more confidence. Qin Yu stood in the crowd. He frowned, but he didn't relax at all. Was Zhang Ling Tian's silence really because he was afraid? Although this was indeed a reasonable explanation, he always felt that things weren't so simple. Perhaps he wasn't afraid, but was deliberately letting them gather together to catch them all in one fell swoop. Qin Yu's breath quickened and his scalp tingled. If this was really the case, just how strong was Zhang Ling Tian to be so bold? He took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling emotions. Then, his eyes fell on a figure not too far away. That brat Su Wenze. Everyone else had no choice but to stay behind because they had nowhere to go. But he had a life-saving treasure in his hands, and yet he still hadn't left? If he continued to stay here, was he just waiting for death? Or could it be that he wanted to take advantage of the situation and wouldn't give up until the end? No matter what the possibility was, it was extremely stupid. Did Su Wenze really think that no one could sense the treasure in his hands? Qin Yu no longer dared to underestimate anyone, since he knew there would definitely be others who could. If he stayed here, even if he didn't die under Zhang Ling Tian's hands, he would still be killed by others. But this was his choice. In this current situation, it was difficult for him to even protect himself. So how could he care about others? Thoughts raced through his mind. Of course, Qin Yu wouldn't admit that deep in his heart, he was indeed filled with envy and jealousy, as well as a bit of greed that couldn't be concealed. But even if he obtained a life-saving treasure, so what? If he escaped here, wouldn't he have to die? Don't be naive. In the end, it was his brat Su Wenze's good life that couldn't be envied. Suddenly, Qin Yu's complexion changed. He looked up into the skies. At this moment, it wasn't just one or two people who did the same thing. It was clear that everyone had already sensed the terrifying aura that was arriving. Zhang Ling Tian had arrived. Even those with slow senses discovered that many people's faces paled once more. No one here was a fool. They could still comfort themselves just now, but now that Zhang Ling Tian had arrived, there was no way they could continue lying to themselves. What bullshit was he afraid of them? This madman actually had the intention of gathering all of them together. Bastard. Was he really so confident that he could eliminate everyone here with his own strength? No matter how much they cursed and roared in their hearts, they couldn't help but admit that the one who was afraid right now wasn't Zhang Ling Tian, but them. Bang! The heavens collapsed. Zhang Ling Tian stepped out, his robes fluttering in the wind. His face was as hard as stone, and he emitted a horrifying pressure. His eyes fell on the people within the black vortexes. They were cold and indifferent, without the least bit of emotion. Everyone is here. Very good. He lifted a hand and pointed between his eyebrows. His eyebrows split open, but not a single drop of blood flowed out. Instead, faint traces of golden light appeared. Although the golden light was extremely weak, anyone who saw it would instantly go stiff. Endless fear rose up like magma from an awakened volcano. It brought with it a dreadfully high temperature that burned their organs. They absolutely could not be touched by this golden light. Kill him. It was unknown who spoke first, But the eyes of all the cultivators revealed a crazed and cruel look. Strike first and gain the advantage. Rumble, rumble. Wild fluctuations of strength erupted. It was like an avalanche that swept through the mountains, its momentum shaking the heavens and earth. All sorts of divine lights wove together. It was like a dazzling rainbow hung in the air in an illusory world. There was no fear on Zhang Lingtian's face. He slowly drew back his hand and pulled out a golden sword from between his eyebrows. He raised his hand and chopped down. There was no sound at all. All of the interweaving divine light that was surging over like a vast avalanche was evenly split in two. Then, between the eyebrows of the cultivators who attacked, a wound appeared. It was incomparably red, as if they had opened a third eye. How is this possible? A cultivator whispered, shock and disbelief in his voice. His eyes moved, fear flooding through them. In the next moment, with the space between his eyebrows as a boundary, this person's body was split in half. All of his life was extinguished and his soul also disintegrated. At this time, he wasn't the only one who died. This was only the beginning. A second, a third, a fourth cultivators fell to the ground, dying one after another. A cultivator whose body was split in half cried out loud. The two halves of his body joined together once more. Flesh and blood crazily wriggled on the surface of the wound. Flesh and blood wove together, growing back together in the blink of an eye. But before joy could bloom on this person's face, he emitted another miserable scream. His body that had just grown back was torn apart once more. After this happened several times, all of his strength was exhausted. This was clearly a cultivator who practiced some powerful, life-saving secret art. But in his despair and unwillingness, he died. With a single sword strike, almost all of the cultivators here died. Since it was almost, there were naturally some fish that escaped the net. For instance, the black water demon that had turned into a mass of black water vapor. Because of its life form, even though most of its black water source had been dispersed by that sword strike, it still managed to preserve its life. Not too far away, Su Wanze staggered to the ground, his face deathly pale. A pure green bamboo slip had been split in half. It was covered with golden ancient characters. Although it was unknown what was written, the vast and boundless momentum it exuded was like a great sun in the skies. Now, these characters were collapsing and fading away one by one. It was because of this ancient letter that Su Xian had given him that Su Wanze was able to preserve his life. Now, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his aura became increasingly miserable. His eyes revealed a bitter helplessness. The reason he had stayed until now wasn't because he didn't know when to advance or retreat, but because he didn't want to disappoint Ancestor Su Xian. Although he didn't know what this so-called great good fortune involved, it was bound to be extremely important to Ancestor Su Xian. But in the end, it was all in vain. Su Wanze apologized inwardly. He flipped his hand, and a pale white key appeared in his palm. He only wanted to do his bit to repay his ancestor's favor. But he wasn't a stupid person. Between life and death, he naturally knew what choice to make. His fingers tightened a little. But at this time, Su Wanze's complexion changed. At some unknown time, a mass of black water had wrapped around him. The water demon's deep and low voice echoed out. If you don't want to leave, then I won't be polite. Bang! A wild strength rumbled outwards. The black water wildly tumbled about, as it was forcefully sent flying away. It's you, you hateful brat. With a hateful roar, the black water condensed into the water demon's figure. It glared at Qinyu. If looks could kill, he would have already been turned into meat paste. Let's leave, Qinyu slowly said. Besides his pale complexion, his aura hadn't weakened much. The golden sword slashed down. What it killed was the soul, affecting the mortal body from the inside out. So, no matter how many times that cultivator's body was restored, his soul had already been cut apart. He was doomed to die. Of course, Qinyu didn't pay a price for this. Within his soul space, a deep sword mark had appeared on the surface of the cosmic sea cross bell. Mimi had already fallen into a deep slumber. The purple moon's light dimmed, becoming even smaller. All that remained was a curved willow branch. Suwon's lips moved, but in the end he didn't say anything. He gratefully nodded and crushed the key in his hand. Kacha, a gray current of energy wrapped around his body, turning him into motes of light that vanished from sight. No! The water demon screamed, its eyes filled with madness. This was already its last chance to survive. It originally thought that Qin Yu's goal was to fight for the key. As long as he attacked, the water demon would have a chance. So it silently gathered strength. But who could have imagined that Qin Yu would casually allow Su Wanze to leave like this? This bastard did not fear death? Even if he didn't fear death, why would he drag him down with him? It was over, it was all over, it was all because of this bastard in front of it. If it weren't for the fact that it had been tricked, it would have already seized the pure Een body as well as that formidable divine spark. How could it have fallen to such a degree? I'll kill you, the water demon howled. But just as it moved, its body froze. A golden line appeared between its eyebrows, extending downwards until it split in two. Bang! The water demon exploded, turning into a mass of black water that was swallowed up by the black vortex formed by the collapse of space. Zhang Lingtan grasped his golden sword and stepped through the void. His voice was deep and dignified. Your opponent can only be me. He lifted a hand and pointed his sword. Make your move. Today's strongest enemy. Let me see your true strength. By now, the majority of his source energy had been consumed. He no longer held any hope that he could continue living. Since he was going to die, then before he died, he would fight a grand battle. Qin Yu had a calm expression. This was the sort of person he was. When a situation couldn't get any worse, he would instead calm down. The strongest enemy? He didn't know how Zhang Lingtian came to this conclusion, but that wasn't important. Then let's fight. In his mind, the ancient demon reared its head back and roared. Qin Yu was like a boulder that had been smashed into a calm lake. In that instant, all tranquility was crushed apart. A wild tide of strength swept outwards with loud, rumbling sounds. The originally collapsing world now turned into chaos. It submerged Qin Yu's figure and turned into an incomparably massive vortex. In the next moment, this vortex began to spin. A terrifying, swallowing strength erupted from within. Endless heaven and earth spiritual strength gathered. The quantity was so great that it was like a raging river. Roar! A loud roar spread out from the vortex. A desolate and boundless aura flooded the world, bringing with it an ancient aura. The heaven and earth spiritual energy that had gathered suddenly became even faster and more abundant. It was so vast that it shocked the heavens and the earth. Zhang Lingtan grasped the golden sword in his hands. His eyes became increasingly bright, like stars in the night sky. He stared at the vortex, the fighting spirit in his chest becoming increasingly strong. The little bit of source energy he had left to begin with began to burn. Hum! The golden sword trembled, emitting a low cry of joy and sorrow. The aura it released became even more terrifying. Outside the hot spring, there was a deathly silence. Zhang Lingtian had killed everyone with a single sword strike. Besides Emperor Zhou, everyone else was shaken. If he wasn't powerful enough, then even if he burned his source, it would have been impossible for him to possess such a terrifying strength. Calamity, immortal realm. At least Zhang Lingtian's strength had reached that of a calamity immortal. At such a young age, he had such a cultivation. Even in their eyes, this was already stunning enough. But such a stunning young master had actually been treated as a chess piece and thrown out without hesitation. Emperor Zhou's methods were truly astonishing. Moreover, if this young man could stand behind Emperor Zhou, then it was likely he was a descendant of the great Zhou's imperial bloodline. This wasn't something that could be described with just a single word. The ruthlessness and callousness of his actions left one unable to help but admire him. But Emperor Zhou's arrangements didn't achieve the desired effect. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Some old fellows that didn't die looked towards the mountain peak where the rotten corpse was. They hoped from the bottom of their hearts that the person they chose would win. They indeed didn't dare to have any designs on Emperor Zhou. But if it were anyone else, even that troublesome Tseng Wu couldn't swallow up the good fortune for himself. As for those that died in the fantasy world, they didn't care. After sleeping for tens of millions of years, perhaps the only one that still cared about old friendships was Su Xian. Big brother. Lin Weiwei's face paled. She was about to rush out. Once his source energy was burnt, Zhang Lingtian would die. She naturally knew just how dangerous this was. Emperor Zhou flicked his sleeves. Her body went limp, and she fainted, wrapped up by an invisible strength. Ignoring the gazes around him, Emperor Zhou looked at the young man holding the golden sword in the fantasy world, his eyes indifferent. The spinning vortex was like a monster. After swallowing up an immeasurable amount of heaven and earth's spiritual strength, it expanded to 100,000 feet in size. It was like a channel to the 9 nether hells. Just by looking at it, endless fear rose up from the bottom of one's heart. Suddenly, the giant vortex came to a stop. Then it loudly exploded, erupting with a terrifying energy. Zhang Lingtian took a step forwards. He lifted the golden sword and held it between his eyes. With him as the boundary, the raging tide of energy split in half. His entire body was like a stabilizing pillar, not shaking in the least. In contrast, what was even more striking was that the entire fantasy world was violently trembling as it was impacted by this raging tide of energy. On the earth, mountains collapsed and rivers broke apart. The heavens were torn apart, like a bowl of tumbling water. A towering figure appeared in this collapsing world. It was 10,000 feet tall, and every inch of its flesh and blood vibrated with a strength that caused the soul to tremble. 2 horns jutted out from its head, pointing towards the heavens. It's unyielding, and unyielding what could break through all obstacles. The heavens could make it lower its head, but the earth could not make it bend its back. It was born to support the heavens and earth, and after death, its spine would not fall. It was an ancient demon. Sparks suddenly burst out in Emperor Zhou's indifferent eyes. He finally understood why an ant-like junior had the qualifications to absorb his aura. Ancient demon. So it was like this. Emperor Zhou revealed a faint smile. Originally, he only had a 50-50 chance of succeeding, but now there was an ancient demon. Although this wasn't its true body, it still increased his chances by 30%. The decayed corpse had been paying attention to Emperor Zhou from the corners of its eyes. As it sensed the smile on his face, its body stiffened. He had fought for a lifetime, slaughtering trillions of lives. In the end, he unified the world, becoming the ruler of the 9-5 and establishing the great Zhou Empire. Such a character actually didn't conceal himself at all, revealing his emotions on the surface. Just what was it that he hadn't thought of? The decayed corpse's heart chilled. It suddenly felt as if it had forgotten something important. But no matter how much it thought about it, its mind was muddled and it couldn't produce any results. What was it? What was it? Within the fantasy world, the strongest battle had already erupted. The golden sword-wielding Zhang Lingtian against the ancient demon incarnated Qinyu. Both of them possessed unfathomable strength. If it weren't for the fact that this fantasy world was condensed by Emperor Zhou and contained his undying will, it would have likely been shattered by now. 2 juniors were actually able to erupt with such astonishing strength. Even some existences that had been slumbering for tens of millions of years were secretly startled. The instability of the fantasy world caused its aura to leak outwards. Waves began to rise up in the calm pool. The crimson magma tumbled like boiling water, as if some terrifying existence were about to awaken from its slumber. In capital, Great Chu Imperial Palace. The Chu Emperor had a dignified expression. As he heard this, a rare excitement appeared in his eyes. He could already feel the restlessness coming from deep within the sea of purgatory. The most critical moment was about to arrive. As he thought about the people that had gathered deep within the sea of purgatory and were desperately fighting for their lives, his lips curled up in a mocking smile. Indeed, the greatest good fortune in the world existed there. The Great Chu Empire had been founded for 30 million years and had experienced several generations of emperors. How could I not know of this? Why didn't they think about why the Chu Empire controlled in capital's great array formation and was blessed by the heavens? Why hadn't they coveted it? The Chu Empire suddenly said, the reason is simple. Is because this great fortune already had a master a long, long time ago. This could be called the most hidden secret in the world. When the Great Zhou Empire was on the verge of collapse and the world fell into chaos, the Mi clan discovered this secret. Thus, they established Ing capital as their capital and established the glory of the Great Chu Empire. If anyone dared to touch something that belonged to him, if that wasn't seeking death, then what was? The golden sword cut through the vast skies, cutting apart all darkness. All that was left was a wild strength that could destroy all. It pressed forward, leaving no room for retreat. Zhang Lingtian's bright eyes dimmed. The dazzling sword in his hand began to collapse little by little. All of his source energy had been fused into this sword. There was no more strength left. His field of vision darkened, as if he had fallen into an icy lake. A chill drilled into his pores, making him feel an incomparably cold chill. His entire body seemed to freeze, and his blood nearly solidified. Even his thoughts began to slow down. Zhang Lingtian took a deep breath. Energy drilled into his chest, bringing with it a burning pain. It was like he was pulling a rolling blade forward. He struggled to stand up straight, a solemn expression on his face. He had to send off his opponent with the most respectful gaze possible. This was indeed the strongest person he had ever fought in his life. It was no wonder Emperor Zhou had ignited his source energy. If he didn't do this, he feared he wouldn't have the qualifications to stand in front of this person. Killing him was indeed a fluke. His only regret was that he didn't know his name. It was just that Zhang Lingtian didn't know that his opponent would be so formidable. Not only did he have the geographical advantage, but he also had the support of Emperor Zhou. That domineering aura of supremacy was the key to condensing the body of an ancient demon. Qin Yu stubbornly stared at the golden waterfall. He didn't feel any regret in his heart. The only thing he could do was curse. You were destined to die, so why did you still try so hard? Wasn't it good to be a man who died in peace? His soul screamed, and his body stiffened. There was only one thought in his mind. He absolutely could not collide with this sword. But how could he do what he wanted? At the very least, Qin Yu discovered that he couldn't avoid it. If he couldn't avoid it, he could only touch it. Even if his mind was clear, touching it meant death. Touching it meant death. Waiting for death also meant death. With Qin Yu's character, there was no need to say what he should choose. Moreover, what mattered now wasn't just his life or death alone. There was also a woman outside who had fallen into the hands of a decaying corpse, waiting for him to return alive. If he died now, she would likely have her neck broken immediately. She might even be brought to his mouth and eaten clean. That scene wasn't beautiful at all. Just thinking about it caused Qin Yu's eyes to turn red. Even now, he couldn't figure out just what was wrong with him that made him place such importance on a woman. Fine, life or death was right in front of him. Qin Yu couldn't lie to himself anymore. But there was no meaning in delving into this any further. I can't die. Qin Yu looked up at the golden beam of light. He thought to himself once more, I cannot die. In this world, in the end, there were only two things. Either he lived or he died. Since he couldn't die, he could only live. This wasn't nonsense, but a belief that Qin Yu needed to remember. Roar! A loud roar rose up from his chest. Then it trembled up his throat until it passed through his mouth and descended into the world. Qin Yu's heart raced at an unprecedented speed. Boundless strength gushed out from his exhausted mortal body once more. This strength was so formidable that it made him feel an unsuppressible urgency in his heart. He had to vent it all out. He lifted his hand and clenched his fist. Then he faced the golden beam of light and smashed it down like a meteor. The ancient demon was born to support the heavens and earth, and even in death its back would not fall. Even in the face of death, it could still issue a final resistance. At this time, Qin Yu's will to live stimulated the true strength of the ancient demon. At this moment, he wasn't a true ancient demon, but he had obtained the inheritance of the ancient demon's will. Emperor Zhou's eyes brightened. Before this, he had an 80% chance of success, and now that this junior had activated the essence, energy, and will of the ancient demon, it could be said that he had reached perfection. Now, he was only a single step away from borrowing strength to break through this shackle and leave this world, returning to where he should be. Although he didn't know who was behind today's plan, he knew that they were far too confident in themselves. Did they really think that things would develop as they expected? The good fortune in front of him was truly astonishing. Even he was moved by it. But if he could take it, he would have done so before he fell asleep. How laughable it was that someone had schemed against him. But this was also good. If it weren't for someone secretly helping him, even if he could escape, it wouldn't have been so simple. The golden beam of light cut through the ancient demon's chest. Blood exploded, dyeing the air red. Qin Yu tried his best to open his eyes wide, but he couldn't control his consciousness from rapidly falling into darkness. In the next moment, the illusory world collapsed. What maintained its existence was Emperor Zhou's undying will. It smashed into the pool of soup like a sledgehammer. Some sort of tremor suddenly appeared. What followed was an aura that seemed as if it would freeze even the bones and souls. The decayed corpse fiercely looked up. Deep within its mind, a memory fragment exploded. Its eyes widened and it turned to flee. It finally realized what it had forgotten. Great good fortune. It was indeed great good fortune. But it didn't belong to this place, nor did it belong to anyone in this world. Damn it. Damn it. Shen Yuanin's eyes fell on Qin Yu. The moment the decayed corpse fled, blood silently flowed out from the corners of her lips. She had broken through the shackles within her. She took several steps forwards and leapt down from the mountain peak. Her white clothes fluttered in the wind like a fairy. Strong winds blew away her blood-stained veil. She reached out and held the unconscious Qin Yu in her arms. Suddenly, a powerful pulling strength erupted from the pool of soup. Shen Yuanin frowned. She looked at Qin Yu in her arms, and after a moment of hesitation, she slowly closed her eyes. In the next moment, absolute cold erupted. A giant sphere of ice condensed in the void, sealing the two within. Dong! Chapter 585. Underground spirit veins gathered from all directions. At this time, they began to tremble and release a dazzling light. These lights wove together in the air. A blurry face appeared from within. Schwartz's eyes opened. They were cold and indifferent, without the least bit of emotion. It was like a god sitting on the throne of the heavenly palace. All of you shall die. A low and deep voice carried with it a grand and irresistible aura. It exploded in the air like roaring thunder. Invisible fluctuations erupted. Wherever they went, everything was annihilated. Not destroyed, but all life was erased. Panicked roars rose up one after another. The old monsters that had been slumbering for countless years, all of them had fear on their faces. They instinctively realized that perhaps their lives would come to an end today. Emperor Zhou lifted his hand and grasped. The unconscious Zhang Lingtian appeared behind him. Then, with a loud shout, 9 phantom dragons appeared and the aura of a transcendent sovereign erupted. In a land of divinity and demons, in the skies above the trillions of territories, 9 phantom dragons appeared at almost the same time. Their bodies were tens of millions of miles long. All living beings in the world could clearly see them if they looked up. Then, awe and fear rose up from the depths of their hearts, as if they were facing a sovereign that controlled life and death. Although the great Zhou had perished tens of millions of years ago, As the only super country that had unified the world since ancient times, there was still a portion of its national destiny that hadn't dissipated. The 9 dragon phantoms that covered the land of divinity and demons were the last remnants of the great Zhou's national destiny that had been activated. Roar, roar. The 9 dragons reared their heads back and roared. Outside the hot spring, invisible fluctuations had already arrived. The 9 phantoms around Emperor Zhou wailed in unison before shattering into motes of light and fading away. But their destruction gave Emperor Zhou a chance to live. Although his complexion paled and his aura weakened by more than half, he still managed to preserve his life beneath this strike. Looking up, the rock-solid Ing capital's great array formation began to violently shake. Kacha! Kacha! Cracks began to appear on the great array formation. Emperor Zhou took a step forwards. He brought Zhang Lingtian and Lin Weiwei with him, instantly vanishing from sight. In the skies above Ing capital, the 9 dragon phantoms that shocked countless cultivators had already collapsed and dissipated. However, before they could breathe a sigh of relief, the originally clear sky suddenly darkened. Then, countless bolts of thunder rumbled in the sky. The berserk sound waves, bringing with them an aura of fear and despair, erupted in all directions. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. The entire Ing capital seemed to be in the midst of raging waves, as if a terrifying creature was about to break out from the depths of the earth. Cracks appeared on the majestic and indestructible city walls. In the blink of an eye, they covered every corner like a spiderweb. Standing on the city wall were the elite imperial guards of Great Chu, who had an awe-inspiring presence. At this moment, all of them, including their generals, had pale faces. They had no idea what had happened, but they knew very well what the city wall beneath their feet meant to Ing City. It was a part of Ing City's Grand Array, so it was reinforced by the Grand Array's power. Even if millions of lightning bolts struck it, it wouldn't be able to damage it in the slightest. It was precisely because of this that the scene before them caused their hands and feet to feel even colder. Had something gone wrong with the Grand Array of Ing capital? How is this possible? Within the Imperial Palace, the great Chu Emperor Mi Ganyuan's chamber suddenly emitted an angry roar. Bang! The violent energy caused the entire secret chamber to instantly turn into dust. The palace maids and attendants standing guard outside the chamber were sucked in as the chamber was destroyed, their bodies and souls destroyed. With a single step, Mi Ganyuan appeared in the skies above the Imperial Palace. His complexion was pale, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. As the great Chu Emperor, he was the most respected figure in the world. Even in the entire land of divinity and demons, he had the qualifications to make a move. With a single thought, he could cause the winds and clouds to change. With a raise of his hand, he could force trillions of lives to bow their heads. But now, he had been ruthlessly used by someone. And what Mi Ganyuan found even more unacceptable was that from start to finish, he had fallen into a trap without even realizing it. This was an extremely heavy blow to a magnanimous emperor who wielded the power of the world. If it was just losing face, then that was fine. But if today's matter wasn't handled well, there would surely be great changes in the land of divinity and demons. The Chu Empire's dream of unifying the world would become even more distant, and it might even become nothing more than a fantasy. Mi Ganyuan could not allow such a thing to happen. He absolutely could not. He took a deep breath. He lifted a hand and pressed down. All of the palaces of the Imperial Palace erupted with divine light. Roar! A golden true dragon howled upwards from the Imperial Palace. Although it wasn't as large as the 9 dragon phantoms that appeared before, it was incomparably solid, as if it were a living creature. Mi Ganyuan stepped forwards, directly fusing into the true dragon's forehead. A brilliant light flashed in its giant eyes. Dragon finishing touch. With the dignity of the great emperor, the true dragon had been enlightened. The golden true dragon that rose from the imperial palace was the energy of the Chu Empire, the spirit of the nation's destiny. As the cabinet minister saw this, his heart shrank. Although he could faintly feel that His Majesty the Emperor was secretly plotting something, this involved the Emperor's secrets. In addition, Mi Ganyuan clearly didn't want others to know about it, so he rationally put it on the side and pretended he didn't know. But now it seemed that His Majesty the Emperor must have made a massive mistake. Otherwise, how could he have awakened the nation's destiny true dragon? This was something that should only occur when the country collapsed and the country was unstable. Suddenly, the cabinet minister's complexion changed and his lips shivered. To become the #1 official of the Chu Empire, ranked above the princes and members of the royal family, he already had the qualifications to touch upon Great Chu's greatest secrets. And now, the Sea of Purgatory was about to open. Could His Majesty really have? How foolish! The cabinet minister no longer cared about watching. His figure flickered, and he appeared above the imperial palace. Yuan Qing. The Chu Emperor's deep and low voice came out from the true dragon's mouth, a hint of regret in it. The cabinet minister's body swayed. How could he not know that his guess was correct? All blood drained from his face. He nervously looked at the emperor, no longer caring about the dignity of a king. Your Majesty. He escaped, the Chu emperor coldly said. I must keep him here no matter the cost. The cabinet minister was silent for several breaths of time. He said, Your Majesty's safety concerns the nation. If anything goes wrong, Great Chu will be thrown into a storm. He lowered his head and looked at the shaking Ing capital. I will leave this matter to Your Majesty. I only hope that in the future, Your Majesty will place the Chu Empire above all else and think twice before you act. Yuan Qing, I will not allow it. The Chu emperor roared. The cabinet minister bowed. In my body flows the bloodline of the emperor clan. To sacrifice my body for Great Chu is my unsurpassed honor. Bang! Blood-red flames fiercely ignited, wrapping around his entire body. In the blink of an eye, his body was turned to ashes. Then, all of these flames rapidly shrank, condensing into a rune before vanishing from sight. The golden true dragon's eyes revealed pain and sorrow. But, deep within, there was also a hint of relief. How could an outsider understand the thoughts of an emperor? Even if he did something wrong, he wasn't willing to make up for it with his own body. Of course, the cabinet minister's sacrifice for Great Chu would surely be rewarded handsomely in the future. Bang! The earth of Ing capital broke apart. Countless giant cracks spread out in all directions. Emperor Zhou howled outwards. In the skies, thunder roared and suddenly rose up. Dragon roars echoed out from the thunder. An invisible suppressive aura descended, like a million mountains crashing down. Countless people felt as if a great stone was pressing down on their chests, making it difficult for them to breathe. Twin emperors. One was the founding emperor of the Great Zhou. He had slaughtered trillions and trillions to establish the Great Zhou Empire, ruling over the world. The other was the current emperor of Great Chu, the leader of the 7 empires. His strength was unparalleled, and he looked down on the world without fear. The moment their gazes met, a million bolts of thunder exploded. The lightning nearly blinded the eyes. Countless weak cultivators began to bleed from their noses and mouths as they fainted. Emperor Zhou, Mi Ganyuan said in a low voice. Emperor Zhou had an indifferent expression. The reason I was able to escape today is all thanks to you. There is no need. A golden true dragon reared its head back and roared. A vast imprisonment descended, suppressing the destiny of a country. Who in the world could stop it? But now, he faced Emperor Zhou. Tens of millions of years ago, he had already stood at the peak of the world. Even if he lost the destiny of the Great Zhou Empire, he was still a rare super powerhouse in the world. He lifted a hand and touched his forehead, drawing out a golden sword. Compared to this, Zhan Lingtian's aura from before was like the difference between the heavens and earth. With a sword in hand, Emperor Zhou's hair began to move without wind. His robes fluttered in the wind. A powerful emperor aura that couldn't be suppressed by the heavens, and earth caused one's soul to tremble. He lifted his hand, and a golden waterfall appeared. It was like a waterfall that fell from the highest heavens, piercing through the endless skies. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. With the point of collision as the center, a wild strength swept out in all directions. Wherever it passed, everything was destroyed and turned to powder. Ing City's cracked walls finally gave in and collapsed piece by piece from this berserk force. The entire imperial capital instantly turned into a purgatory. It was unknown how many lives have been lost in this collision. Ever since the Great Chu Empire was founded and Ing capital was established, this was the first time something like this had happened. Mi Ganyuan's complexion became extremely ugly. No matter what he did afterwards, this matter would be recorded in the annals of history. It would become the greatest scandal under his rule. At this time, a blood-red rune suddenly appeared. It seemed to have its own spiritual wisdom as it howled forwards. Emperor Zhou's complexion changed. For the first time, a dignified look appeared in his eyes. Without hesitation, he reached out a hand and pulled Zhang Lingtian in front of him. A powerful aura instantly poured into his body. With loud, crackling sounds, Zhang Lingtian awoke from his unconscious state. His eyes widened as he howled in pain. The approaching blood-red rune hesitated for a moment before it sank into his body. Just as Zhang Lingtian's pitiful screams began, he was ruthlessly pressed down. His body couldn't move, but the twitching flesh and blood on his face, as well as the blood-red color that spread out from his eyes, were enough to let one know just what sort of terrifying pain he was withstanding right now. Blood God Seal. Emperor Zhou's voice was ice-cold, killing intent tumbling between his words. Fake Emperor, I will remember today's events. There will be a day when my cavalry will trample over Ing capital and destroy the Great Chu Empire. I will exterminate your bloodline of the Emperor race and send them into the endless abyss, never to reincarnate. Bang! Space collapsed, swallowing his figure. The golden true dragon roared out loud. Its giant tail swept out, and it shot forwards like a bolt of lightning, drilling into the shattered space and chasing after Emperor Zhou. Today was Emperor Zhou's weakest moment. If he couldn't be killed, there would be endless troubles waiting for him. After a moment, the golden true dragon flew back. Mi Ganyuan's angry roars echoed through the highest heavens. Shua, the golden true dragon flashed. It arrived outside the third assistant governor's residence. It opened its mouth, and a golden dragon breath rapidly condensed, its terrifying aura rising up. Within the study, the third assistant governor tidied his clothes and smiled. Your Majesty, if taking my life can make you feel better, then I am willing to accept death as the last thing I can do for you. The golden true dragon's eyes filled with a cold chill. As the golden dragon breath fell down, the grand and majestic assistant governor's residence instantly vanished from sight, vaporized into nothingness. Demonic path, holy palace. Dang, dang. A deep and solemn bell suddenly rang out, carrying with it a sad aura that spread throughout the entire demonic path Holy Land small world. A total of 99 rings. The demon envoy stood in the grand hall, his complexion pale. His eyes were filled with anger and regret. With 99 supreme numbers, the only one that could cause the Holy Palace's sacrificial bell to ring was His Highness the Saint's son. Had he died? Cloud Grove City Mu family. The Mu family old ancestor rushed out of seclusion. As he heard the ringing of the bell reverberate through the world, his eyes widened. His wrinkled face was now filled with ecstasy. The saint's son had perished. To the Mu family, this was undoubtedly the best news. The Mu family might be able to use this chance to extricate themselves from his quagmire. Men immediately open the clan's treasury and bring out all the precious treasures. No matter the cost, we must restore Mu Mo to his original state. Currently, the one closest to the throne of the saint's son was him. As long as Mu Mo could smoothly inherit the throne, all problems could be solved. the Mu family would still be the #1 family of the demonic path. East Sun City, Holy Palace. The normally orderly palace was now in a state of chaos. The proud and aloof palace attendants all had pale complexions. His Highness the Saint's son had died. In the inner hall, Ning Liang's eyes were red. Large beads of tears fell down her cheeks. Hai Lan Lan sat across from her, her expression calm. But her trembling hands revealed her surging emotions. "Little sister, don't worry. His Highness has handed you over to me. I will definitely protect you." Her voice was hoarse and hoarse, unable to continue. "Heavens, why are you treating us like this?" At the endless seabed, cries filled holy Nether City. The death of His Highness meant that the dawn of hope for the holy Nether Guard had vanished. Even if a new Saint Lord appeared in the future, would they still be able to accept people like them who had changed masters? If not, then eternal darkness would descend, and their clan would no longer have any chance of survival. A month passed. In Capital's Great Array was activated, sealing away the sea of purgatory. Elder Chun sat in the audience. His complexion was faint, but his heart was icy cold. He had already received news from the Holy Land, but he wasn't willing to believe it. But even today, the Saint's son still hadn't returned. The true demon guards that followed him had all remained in the sea of purgatory. All of this proved that the Saint's son had indeed perished. Within his sleeves, he clenched his fists. His breathing quickened and anger tumbled in his eyes. He had already said that the son of a noble family wouldn't take such a risk. As the dignified Saint's son of the demonic path, how could he take such a risk? And now, something like the heavens collapsing had occurred. Elder Chin's eyes fell on the highest throne. The Chu Emperor's expression was faint, and it was impossible to see what he was thinking. But not too long ago, news of the Great War that implicated in Capital couldn't be concealed. Emperor Zhou hadn't died and had returned to the world. This had become the most explosive news in the land of divinity and demons in recent times. Was the Saint's son's death related to this? Elder Chen shook his head and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. This sea of purgatory was 10 times, 100 times more dangerous than any other time it had been opened in the past. The Chu Empire's side had also suffered heavy casualties. Without absolute evidence, it was impossible to question this. Moreover, no matter how much they investigated this, it was meaningless. The Saint's son's death was a tremendous blow to the demonic path. After the sea of purgatory was sealed off, there were no traces of outside cultivators. Peace was gradually restored. The 12 stone tablets still stood tall in all directions. But now, the tablets were all broken. Underneath the half-snake stone tablet, there was a rune skeleton. The black fire in its eye sockets had long since dissipated. But even as it died, its mouth was still open, a happy smile on its face. To play a game of chess with the Chu Emperor and obtain a complete victory in the end was certainly something to be proud of. Of course, they also had to thank Emperor Zhou for this. If it weren't for his existence, things wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Deep within the sea of purgatory, the spirit veins that gathered together continued to pour their strength into the great sun. The pool below was quiet without the slightest fluctuation. If it weren't for the surrounding broken mountains and the terrifying cracks that hadn't yet disappeared, who would have thought that a destructive strength from beyond the world had descended here not too long ago? His gaze continued to move, entering the shockingly hot pool. Only then did he discover that it was unexpectedly deep. Down, all the way down, until a mountain peak appeared in his line of sight. It was only 1,000 feet high. Half of it was flowing with magma, and the other half was covered in ice and snow. Moreover, this mountain peak was still sinking. It was unknown where it would end. In the vast sea of stars, countless stars dotted the darkness. Not too far away, a burning star illuminated this broken continent. Pieces of land tumbled through the nothingness as they floated into the distance. They constantly disintegrated, becoming smaller and smaller. Occasionally, one could see burning palaces and panic-stricken lives, begging for mercy from the heavens. It was just that they would never have imagined that in their moment of despair and helplessness, Two great figures that could save them were standing in the skies above the broken continent, talking to each other. You have crossed a boundary. The person across from him frowned before immediately composing himself. I know, but there's a reason for this. The other person shook his head. There is no reason. Crossing a boundary is crossing a boundary. The remnant space channel is an extremely unstable factor. I will solve it, just like what you're seeing. No. The first person to speak turned and left. You have already attracted attention. Don't cause any more trouble for the time being. Humph. The other person's complexion darkened. After a long time, he coldly sneered and left. From start to finish, the two of them didn't care about the collapsing continent or the desperate and pleading lives on it at all. They were nothing more than lowly ants. So what if a trillion lives perished? It wasn't worth wasting their strength. Yu finally woke up from his coma. The first feeling he had was that he had slept well, and the second feeling was that she smelled really good. This caused his thoughts to turn slower than usual. In addition, he hadn't woken up yet. As he saw Shen Yuanin's face so close to him, he found it hard to regain his composure. How could this icy, cold woman be so fragrant? Moreover, why was she here? And where was she right now? Questions popped up one after another, causing Qin Yu's already muddled mind to become even more confused. You're awake. A cold voice entered his ears, like a cold wind blowing against him. Qin Yu's mind was shaken, and his eyes became clear. He really was a miserable wretch. Shen Yuanin stood up. The lingering fragrance scattered. She seemed to guess what Qin Yu was going to ask. She directly said, "We were pulled into the pool of soup. We should still be in the sea of purgatory." Qin Yu only remembered that his ancient demon body had been cut apart by a sword, and Shen Yuanin had been controlled by the rotten corpse. What happened afterwards? A dignified look appeared in Shen Yuanin's eyes. A terrifying aura descended upon the sea of purgatory. Although I don't know what it was, when the rotten corpse sensed it, it was scared away. Even when facing the heaven-shaking Emperor Zhou, the rotten corpse didn't have any thoughts of retreating. Just this point alone was enough to prove just how terrifying that aura was. The rotten corpse had fled, and Shen Yuanin had regained her freedom. But why hadn't she fled? Why was she here? Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He couldn't help but glance at her several times. As he saw Shen Yuanin's faint expression, he coughed and changed the topic. How long have I been unconscious for? 17 days. Qin Yu nodded. It's been so long. Thank you for looking after me. He suddenly stopped, his body stiffening. How long? Shen Yuanin lightly said. You didn't hear wrong, and I wouldn't miscalculate. If I'm right, then the Sea of Purgatory should have been sealed off by now. At this time, Qin Yu really couldn't remain calm. The Sea of Purgatory was connected to Ing City's Great Array Formation. If the Sea of Purgatory was sealed off, that meant that unless they broke through Ing City's Great Array Formation, or if the outside world opened it on their own, they would never be able to leave. The former was clearly something that was impossible to accomplish. The latter required him to wait for at least several million years, or perhaps even longer. Looking at the indifferent and incomparably calm Shen Yuanin, Qin Yu couldn't help but rub his temples. This woman's heart was far too big. If they couldn't break through Ing City's Great Array Formation, would they have to stay here for the rest of their lives? After a long period of silence, Qin Yu let out a long breath. No matter what, we are still alive. As long as we don't die, there will definitely be a chance. Deep in Shen Yuanin's eyes, a fluctuation flashed. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, but in the end she didn't say anything. Qin Yu rubbed his face. Let me formally introduce myself. I am the demonic path Xiaobin, Shen Yuanin. It really was her. Qin Yu had already expected this. This woman was a female cultivator from the immortal sect. With such a cultivation at such a young age, and what she cultivated was the sublime lost emotion code, she could only be the new master of Nine Heaven Mirror Moon Palace. Although he was already prepared, he still couldn't help but have a strange feeling when he heard her personally admit it. One was the saint son of the demonic path's holy palace, and the other was one of the three giants of the immortal sect. Even if they didn't immediately kill each other upon seeing each other, they definitely wish for each other to die without a grave. How had he and Shun Yuanin become like this? You save me. I save you. You save me. I save you. They were just playing house. If this matter were to be known by others, regardless of whether they believed it or not, they would definitely laugh their heads off. The relationship between the immortal sect and demonic path. Don't joke with me. Qin Yu rubbed his nose and dryly laughed. I've heard so much about you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Seeing that Shun Yuanin didn't have any intention of responding, he could only broach the subject. Palace Master, I have a matter that I hope you can honestly tell me. Shun Yuanin lightly said, it does not involve the secrets of the immortal sect. This woman was really boring and inflexible. She didn't even think about what sort of situation they were in right now. How could he have any other thoughts? Of course not. After a moment of hesitation, Qin Yu said, I heard that before Palace Master succeeded the throne, you worshipped Great Elder Purple Moon. Yes. Qin Yu was overjoyed. He hurriedly asked, then, Palace Master, do you know a woman named Ningling? Shin Yuanin shook her head. I don't. How could you not know her? Palace Master, think about it carefully. According to what I know, Shin Yuanin is also a disciple of Great Elder Purple Moon. Shin Yuanin lightly said, your information is wrong. I'm the only disciple under Honorable Master. I have never heard of any other disciples. Qin Yu frowned, and his complexion darkened. With his understanding of Shun Yuanin and their current situation, there was no need for her to lie. But Ningling was clearly a disciple of Purple Moon. She had personally experienced this matter, so there was absolutely no mistake, just what had happened here. Where was Ningling? Shin Yuanin looked at his angry and restless expression. For some unknown reason, she subconsciously frowned. This woman, is she very important to you? As she asked this, she furrowed her eyebrows even tighter. Was she concerned about his matters? Qin Yu didn't notice her expression. He took a deep breath and nodded. Palace Master and I can be considered friends who have gone through life and death together. If I can leave this place in the future, I ask that Palace Master consider this friendship and help me search for her in the immortal sect. This woman is indeed very important to me. If it were anyone else, they might have used Ningling as a method to threaten Qin Yu. But he believed that Shun Yuanin wasn't such a person. His words conveyed the trust in her. Shin Yuanin was startled. Her eyebrows relaxed, and she nodded. Of course. Seeing Qin Yu solemnly thank her, Shin Yuanin thought for a moment and said, there is something I need to tell you. If we stay here, we won't be able to last much longer. Qin Yu's complexion changed. Shin Yuanin pointed at the barrier above their heads. You will know once you sense it. The fusion of water and fire was formed by their auras. Qin Yu closed his eyes, and his mind smoothly fused in. Soon, his complexion became incomparably ugly. He opened his eyes and said, Palace Master has been awake this entire time. According to your estimation, how much time do we have? The destructive strength of the pool was constantly corroding the barrier of ice and fire. Once the barrier was pierced through, the result could be imagined. Shun Yuanin lightly said, it should be around 3 to 5 days. The corners of Qin Yu's lips twitched. With his shrewdness, he also wanted to curse out loud. Being trapped in the sea of purgatory was one thing. Even if it was the Ying capital's great array formation that was known to be unshakable by calamity immortals, he still had the confidence to fight out. But there was only 3 to 5 days of time. What the hell could he do with that? For a time, Qin Yu fell into a daze. It seemed that all he could do now was wait for death. No one spoke. The air was quiet, making one feel restless. But this clearly didn't affect Shun Yuanin. She closed her eyes and calmly adjusted her breathing. If she couldn't find the Jade Soul Ice Heart, she would eventually die. Thus, to her, being trapped in the sea of purgatory wasn't important at all. In fact, even if she only had 3 to 5 days of life left, it didn't matter. On the contrary, deep in Shun Yuanin's heart, she felt a sense of peace. Perhaps it was because there was someone who would accompany her in death. She told herself this. Although she still felt it was strange, she didn't want to think too much about it. But Chinyu wasn't willing to accept this result. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and stood up. He roused his spirits and walked back and forth in the barrier, making all sorts of attempts to save his life that was nearing its end. But unfortunately, without exception, all of his attempts ended in failure. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.